and welcome to the Ivy Baptist Church Women's Health Summit. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here, everybody. Woo! This is so exciting. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Jessica Larche, and I help wake everybody across Hampton Roads up early in the morning on News 3. And I'm really excited to be here because we're talking about women's health, and it is so important. I know pandemic is top of mind, and we need to make sure we're safe and healthy when we protect ourselves from COVID-19, but we have to make sure that we are not neglecting every other part of our experience as women. And health has been so important to me. A lot of you have cheered me on and supported me through my own wellness journey, not just the journey losing 100 pounds, but also with mental health and anxiety. And so we've been very open about these topics of conversation at News 3, and so I'm so glad that we get to expand the conversation this morning. And I have to give a shout out to Lady Swann, who is joining me here this morning. She's the reason we're doing this event, and a big reason that we're talking about breast cancer. She's a breast cancer survivor. So tell us about your journey and why it was so important for you to open this event up to the community.
Good morning, and thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for our online viewers as well. It's a great question. The why for me is my breast cancer journey started at 28 years old, and I had just had our daughter, going back for a 6-week checkup, just like most of us do, or all of us do after we've had a baby, and my gynecologist said that there was something that didn't feel right. And I was concerned because our daughter was not breastfeeding as we had expected. So between my issues and my own concern and his concern, we did some further testing and came back with a diagnosis that I had breast cancer. So I was not the norm. That was not the norm 20 years ago, and it certainly isn't the norm now. So I'm grateful. I know that I'm blessed, but I also know that because of that journey, it has been my responsibility to bring awareness to it, to women in our community that don't look as young, don't look as seasoned as seasoned as we would expect it to be. So it's just been a blessing and a journey for me.
When Lady Swann and I were talking about her journey, there were several things that came to mind. One, I said, your daughter saved your life.
Yes.
Because if it had not been for your pregnancy and giving birth to her, you would not have known that was there. But the insistence that you knew something wasn't right and that your doctor went the extra mile and didn't just dismiss it as maybe it's something else going on. Why was that so important?
We don't often listen to our bodies. And for so long and so often we hear when medical professionals tell us, oh, it's just this, or we chalk it up to something else. It is just so important, and I learned at an early age, my mother always taught me that if it didn't feel right, then it wasn't right. And to always listen to, know your body well enough to know when something just isn't right.
And to speak up about it.
And to speak up about it, absolutely.
So you have a beautiful story, and you have 2 beautiful children.
Yes, they are our joy.
And who are here because you spoke up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So we're so happy you're here, and we know because of your testimony and so many people sharing their stories, people are getting their mammograms, people are taking a greater interest in their own health. And so why was it, as we begin to unfold our conversations today, why was it so important for you to talk not just about breast cancer, but about cardiovascular health, mental health, domestic violence? Why did you want to touch on all of those things?
Again, so often in our communities, and particularly in our churches, we don't talk about these subjects. It's taboo, and we don't know the facts. We learn our facts through experience on the street, in the hair salon. Let's be honest, ladies, a lot of the things that we've learned and we've heard about, the things that are going on in our communities with our bodies, we didn't learn it the right way. So it's important to me to know that there are resources out there for not just myself, but for everybody, for those of you that are viewing online. There are resources out there that are just for us. We know all too often here in our own church the situations that we hear firsthand, that the journeys that we continue to walk with women through. So we know that it's going on. We just don't talk about it, and I just want to make sure that particularly with the pandemic, people are finding themselves in spaces with people that they often don't spend as much time with, and things are coming to light. And those things are spilling over into our communities, spilling over into our churches, and it is time that we have an honest conversation about it.
We're going to do that today. So everybody, we are a family, we are a community. Whatever questions you have, listen into this conversation, take notes, and again, there are resources out there to help. And one of the first topics that we are going to tackle today is mental health. And our first guest today, I'm so excited to talk about this because I think over time we've helped kind of break down the stigma when it comes to mental health, is Dr. Melissa Gomes. She's an associate professor at Hampton University School of Nursing and a board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. She offers a progressive track record of empowerment strategies that are needed to promote positive mental health outcomes. Her life's work has been instrumental in providing high-quality care to people suffering from unmet mental health needs. And she has also been an out-of-the-box thinker who's been able to push against the grain to meet mental health treatment demands, and that is so important. Her research and clinical work have focused on vulnerable populations disproportionately affected by negative environmental factors like trauma, psychosocial stress, and poverty. So let's learn a bit more about Dr. Gomes and her mission.
You know that feeling where your thoughts scare you or make life tough? Sometimes it feels like no one else in the world has those thoughts or feelings. No one seems to know how difficult it is to deal with your feelings. And it's not easy to share your deepest secrets. You might think something is wrong with you. Or you might worry what other people think. And all of that makes your thoughts and feelings worse. Our culture has created this environment of shame. Until the 1960s, society sent people away if they had challenges managing their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Over time, we learned that we didn't have to be afraid. We learned how to help people get better. We became hopeful. But there are remnants of those images in our culture today, which is why some people still feel uncomfortable talking about it. The stigma has taken new forms too. With more access to more people all the time, it can seem like the world is telling us it's not okay to be anything but perfect. The truth is, everyone has thoughts or feelings that can be hard to deal with. So why do we make it so difficult on ourselves by judging others who could be going through the same challenges we are? What if, instead of seeing labels, we saw people who are struggling and could be there for them so they didn't feel so alone? What if we looked past our fear of mental health and started to talk about it in a constructive way? What if, as a society, we used empowering words and healthy images to help people feel supported? Maybe then more of us could feel comfortable telling others when we're having a hard time. Maybe more people would get the help they need. And maybe one day we won't have to talk separately about mental health and physical health, but just health. The truth is, each of us has the power to change our culture. Will you join us? Share this video with a kid, your neighbor, a friend, and help us break the stigma of mental health.
Everyone, please give a round of applause for Dr. Melissa Gomes joining us this morning. I love how the video says we're working toward getting to the point where we don't have to have a dividing line between health and then mental health. It is all health. Why is it so important to break this stigma?
Because a lot of us have different struggles on a daily basis. And we know that our mental space, our mental health, impacts our physical health. And so they're not separate. So we know that if we're going through a stressor, our body creates a stress response. And when that stress response is not dealt with or we don't calm down, then that, in essence, burns up our brain chemicals, which makes us feel depressed, anxious, tired, unable to do the things that we normally would like to do.
I find the biggest part with the stigma is that, for so long, people have not felt comfortable opening up to doctors or family members about how they're feeling inside. And the biggest problem is you blame yourself. Why am I anxious? Why do I feel depressed? Why is something not right? And we take such a huge like it's a failure on us for not being able to process things on our own. Is that what you find has been a huge misconception about mental health, that we blame ourselves for not being well all the time?
Absolutely. I think I tell a lot of my own patients, if you had high blood pressure, you wouldn't tell your blood pressure to go down. So it's similar in mental health. If you have depression, you can't say, oh, just feel better today. Maybe there's some things that you can do to try to snap out of it. Maybe make sure you get out of bed and make sure you shower, make sure you go for a walk. But those things can work for a point of time. I think that, like I said earlier, with that stress response, the symptoms of depression are generally because you have lower neurochemicals. And we can't tell our bodies to make those neurochemicals if they're that low. So that's where the diagnosis actually comes in and the treatment comes in. And so that's not something that an individual can do on their own.
And we talk about a lot about prayer and faith and how we integrate that into our health, especially the mental health space. And for so long, we have seen people suffering, and the advice of some has been just to pray it away, or you're not praying hard enough. And then we're thinking, well, you know, is something wrong with my faith that I don't trust God enough that he will, you know, snap his fingers and just heal me from this depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, whatever it is someone is experiencing. And then what does that add? Another layer of guilt. Like, okay, this is my fault that I'm struggling, and something's wrong with me that I don't trust God enough to snap his fingers. And I think what we are all opening our minds to is understanding that God works in a number of ways. He works through therapists, he works through medication, he works through meditation, through exercise, all of these things. Do you find that the conversation, especially when we're talking about faith and mental health, is allowing people the liberty to understand that, yes, God can work in a number of ways, medication and therapy is a part of that plan too?
Absolutely. And I think that it comes from conversations like this, because if we don't speak up and we think we talk to our parents, and maybe our parents were taught to pray it away. While prayer does work in a lot of instances, and it's an adjunct, or it helps in the process, we still have to make sure that we're talking to a number of different people. So your pastor, of course, your friend, but also your clinician, and a clinician that is going to listen to you, not somebody that doesn't have the time to really get to the root of what you're experiencing. Because sometimes when you first meet a clinician, you can start to talk about what you feel, but if they cut you off or if they go in another direction, then you don't get out what you really are feeling. And if you don't have that connection, something definitely can be missed. And so as an advocate for yourself, you have to make sure that you're getting out the information and the experience that you're actually going through.
I think the other thing is within families, talking about mental health. And my first understanding of mental health, my maternal grandmother, she battled depression. And so my mom is here today, and she'll remember these conversations with Grandma Joyce. Very accomplished woman. She taught for several decades and was always on it. But she struggled with depression, and she visited a psychiatrist. We knew that his name was, I think, Dr. Milky. She always taught, she had a black and white composition notebook where she would write all of her notes with her conversations with Dr. Milky, and she took medication. And she was very open with us to talk about that. And so that was our experience, but it was also very scary when she would have depressive episodes. And thank God she had the tools around her. So in our family, at least, there was a beginning of a conversation. On the other hand, it would make it scary when you would feel yourself struggling. And so I've shared this with our News 3 audience, which is why I'm passionate about mental health. Maybe 10 years ago, not long after I started at News 3, I really was not in a healthy space, and I was getting ready to deliver a live report and had a panic attack on the air. And so I didn't understand what was happening to me. It was like I couldn't get my footing in the moment. And so I spoke to my general practitioner, my doctor, and told her what happened. I was like, well, do we need a heart monitor? Because my heart felt like it was about to beat out of my body, and I was sweating, and then I carried that fear and anxiety to everyday normal tasks, right? If I was, doing anything, if I was going to the grocery store and I felt my heart beating fast, I'm like, is this it happening again? What's happening? And I went to my doctor, and we ran a bunch of tests, which was great. And then she said, well, I think you need to see somebody. And we know when they say see somebody. And I was almost offended. And I suffered for a year trying to self-medicate anxiety on my own, and ate a lot of food and gained a lot of weight in the process and was miserable until I realized God was trying to answer my prayers, and he already had by, hey, go to therapy. And it's, been 8 years that I've been with Dr. Nottingham, and it has saved my life. Wow. And I don't say that lightly. It really has. And so being in that experience, just having the conversation, having a doctor that didn't dismiss me and said, I think you need to see someone. Are you getting more referrals from people because more general practitioners are recommending, or that more people are speaking up to say, hey, I don't think something's right?
I think it's a little bit of a mix, actually. The pandemic has created a space where people are starting to realize, okay, well, maybe my thoughts are racing a little bit too much, that I'm sitting in this house and I can't get out. And they're starting to recognize the symptoms a little bit more. And we're seeing a lot of public service announcements where even celebrities are talking about anxiety and talking about depression, and they're starting to notice, okay, maybe that's what I feel when I can't get up in the morning and I can't get going. And so they'll self-refer. They'll go on the website and make a request for an appointment. But providers are also referring as well. And I think that now general practitioners are referring to psychiatric specialists because we can do a little bit more, I guess, tinkering and feel a little bit more comfortable with the different types of meds. And so we get those types of referrals for cases that are a little bit more complex. So it's a mix. It's a mix.
And again, that complexity is not your fault. Can you talk a little bit more about the science of mental health issues, and that it's not something that we should bear as this, something that we did wrong at some point in our lives, that we're experiencing this? Talk about the science of it and why it's not an individual's fault.
Yes. So we are all born with genes, and our genes will dictate whether we're tall, whether we're short, whether we have blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes. But it also dictates our mental health too. And then, so if you have a family member that's had a mental health diagnosis, chances are you could also have gotten that gene that allows you to have symptoms of anxiety or depression as well. And then there's also a gene-environment interaction. So if you put yourself, or you've been placed in a situation where you have a stressor or an event that triggers anxiety or stress, that can turn on a gene. And when that gene gets turned on, then you can also start to display symptoms of anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, a number of different mental health diagnoses. And I often use this analogy with my patients. So I said earlier, you can't tell yourself, I'm just not going to be depressed today, right? And I talk a lot about the stress, because we're all having different stressors right now. But stress is like the flame that lights the wick of a candle, right? And so you light that wick, and the candle burns down the wax. And so when you have a stressor, that turns on your fight or flight response, which increases cortisol, which is your stress response hormone. And when you have too much of that and it doesn't turn off and it doesn't go down, your brain is trying to say, okay, we're good. You don't have to be stressed anymore. But if you're always stressed and you're in situations that your primitive brain kicks in and recognizes, oh, when my heart raced really fast the other day, I was getting ready to have a panic attack. And now that I'm feeling that way, I think I'm probably going to have a panic attack again, right? So it just kind of happens automatically. But if that always happens, that burns down the wax. And the wax is your brain chemicals. And the brain chemicals are your norepinephrine, your dopamine, your serotonin, among a lot of other different chemicals. But when you don't have enough of those because you've burned out that wax, then you start to feel sluggish, and you start to feel anxious, and you start to feel lack of motivation, lack of drive. And so basically what needs to happen is those chemicals have to get put back in your brain, and that happens with medicine. You can also exercise, you can also eat right, because those things are important too. But if you're at the point where your functioning is not good, and you can't do it with your own coping mechanisms, then that's probably a good time to go ahead and see a provider.
I love how you explain that, because I think understanding the science, I know there's a lot of words that we may not have understood and all of that, but understanding that there is science to this, I think alleviates the pressure that we put on ourselves of like, why am I this way? I think that was the biggest question before I started going to therapy, was such a, why am I this way? What is wrong with me? I did something wrong. And when you realize like, hey, this is not my fault. Sometimes we're just wired differently. Can you talk about, yes, there are this set of factors that we may be more prone to things than the other, but it doesn't mean that that has to be our fate.
Right. So there's always hope. There's always something that can be done. And so the biggest thing is recognizing when you're not feeling your best, and recognizing that you need to speak up about it. And if someone is diagnosed with depression or anxiety and they're given medicine, medicine doesn't have to be something that you take forever. It can be something that when you start to feel better and you're in consultation with your provider, then they can work on a plan to stop the medicine. But that's a discussion that needs to happen probably with your provider, because I think a lot of people take things into their own hands, and they might start medicine and then stop, and start and stop, and then that can make it worse. And also, I don't want to negate therapy. I'm not talking as much about it. I'm a little biased. I happen to be a medication provider. But therapy is important, because therapy helps you to retrain your thoughts. And therapy helps you to analyze the perspective that you're coming from. And so if you're somebody who errs on being more self-conscious and a ruminator, and not having healthy thoughts, and that can run away like a train, which can then lead to self-doubt. It can lead to anxiety and panic attacks, I guess. And so it's important to have a provider that you can actually talk to, and they can help you figure out, okay, where's that thought coming from? And examining, is that rational or irrational? So
that has been the source of a lot of discussions. Is this rational or irrational? Because sometimes we go around so long without the perspective of a professional, and our friends and family are great, right? But they are not always qualified mental health professionals that can give medical advice on how to handle situations. So it is great to have that perspective, and to talk a little bit more about the therapy piece. So my therapist, Dr. Nottingham, is a psychologist, so she doesn't prescribe. But when she recognized that, she was like, I think maybe let's try something. Because sometimes, especially with anxiety, it can consume your entire body, where you just feel restricted, and you almost feel like you're playing a role in front of the world, so you can get through the day. But you feel this like internal conflict just inside. And she's like, okay, let's give something a try. And so we did. And I was even nervous about that until the point where I was just like, I can't, like, life is meant to be enjoyed, and I can't go around not feeling like me. And so, to your point, what the medication did was it allowed me to remind myself of what Jessica feels like.
Yeah.
And I just was, oh, this is what I'm supposed to feel like. And so we worked on that plan, and to your point, I was able to be on the medication for a time, and we were able to wean off under medical supervision. And I think it's also okay that if you need to be on medication for long term or for life, that's okay too, as long as you're employing the other skills that you're learning in therapy to get to the root of the why. You've helped us navigate, taking the pressure off of ourselves, understanding the science of why we can experience mental health issues. Why are you personally so passionate about this? What made you want to get into this field?
Growing up, my friends always called me Mother Hen. And I think that's my personality. I tend to want to be the person who helps to solve problems, I guess. And so I think that's just where I gravitate towards. But under personal experience, my grandmother was a worrier, right? So she had anxiety. My mother is a worrier. She has anxiety. My dad is quiet, a little bit to himself. And so I saw patterns in my own family where I felt like I was always the one that had to lift everybody up, right? And so I think that's probably why I got into the mental health field, because I wanted to make sure that patterns of behavior do not continue. And so what better way to do it than to do it as a profession.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you were destined to do this, that this was a part of your calling?
I think so, because I actually came about this in a roundabout way. I went to undergrad at Howard, and when I got out of undergrad, I thought that I was going to go to, I think it was University of Pittsburgh for psych mental health nurse practitioner, but I didn't do it. I actually ended up in oncology, and then in a community health center. But then eventually, and then I got a doctorate and everything, but then I went back to get my nurse practitioner specialization, and I felt like that completed what it was that I had to offer, so.
And we are so grateful that you're in this space, especially as a Black woman, to show us, because especially as Black women, we shoulder so much and feel like we have to do it on our own. What is it, Superwoman syndrome, or but to be able to see someone who looks like us, who can help us navigate those waters. How important is that? And we know that there are great therapists and psychiatrists of all races and backgrounds, and you have to go with the person that God sends to you to help you navigate it. But how important is it also to, when you see another Black woman coming to help, does that kind of release a barrier, so to speak?
I believe it does. I believe it does. Just as people of color, we've had to shoulder so much, and I think that it's important that we have somebody that can relate to what it is we have to deal with, whether it's microaggressions or whether it's shouldering the pressures of having to raise a family and go to work. And I think it's important to understand that there's a connection there subliminally. And I think when people come into my practice, I try to be very warm and very welcoming, and I try not to cut them off. I try to make sure that I can get the essence of what they're going through, especially for that first appointment. And maybe that's just my gift. You know, my husband calls me the secret stealer, you know, but maybe that's my gift. But I think it's important that you can feel comfortable enough with me that you can tell me your secret. You can tell me enough that I can make some connections and try to help come up with a plan for you to get on a path to wellness.
I love the secret stealer. I like that's good. And talking about revealing how we're feeling, and in therapy sessions, so much will come up, right? Especially when you have a great therapist or psychiatrist that's kind of helping you navigate past trauma, past situations that have kind of shaped who you are. One of the biggest hesitations I had is that I thought that the therapist was going to be judging me. Yeah. It's like, I'm sitting here telling all my business, and I know they write on a notepad, this chick is crazy. Like that is, and I don't even like the term crazy, but you understand what I mean. Like that's immediate. I said, Lord, I'm telling everything, and she gonna tell her friends. Mm-hmm. The news lady came in here and said that she was eating a box of chicken in the car by herself. Like that is what I imagined, but I learned over time that is certainly not it. What do you want to say to folks who are hesitant about going because they don't want to or they're afraid of opening up. You are not doodling on your notepad,
Yeah.
Gossip about this person.
Right. We don't talk about you over dinner. I think that's important to know. And I often tell my patients, this is a no judgment zone. Just whatever you want to say. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to judge your experience. I'm just here to help. I'm just here to figure out what perspective you have or what you've been through so I can understand, okay, so you had a panic attack while you were in the midst of your job, and then you started to have the symptoms, and then every time you walk in that building, you start to have the symptoms. Okay, that tells me that it's automatic. You're remembering that, and your body is kicking in. So I connect the dots. That's what I do, and that's why we need to know all the information. That's why we dig so much. But I tell people this is a non-judgment zone. No judgment, no. And although your experience is your experience, but when you've done this for a long time, you hear a lot of different experiences. But there's almost nothing I haven't heard at this point, right? So it's not that I'm poo-pooing anybody's experience, but I don't think you can shock me, right? Number one, I'm a nurse, and nurses, we just don't get shocked. And so I can keep a poker face like anybody, And so I just want people to feel comfortable so that they know, oh, I can tell her anything, and she's just gonna help me through it. She's not gonna judge me.
Well, I think there's a credit to what you said about you've heard. There's nothing you think you haven't heard at that point. To me, that gives me peace, because that means this crazy thing that I've been through, you've been through, this thing I think no one else in the world, you have probably encountered someone else that has gone through it. And so it feels less isolating to know that there's probably very little at this point that some of your patients haven't shared,
right,
in common experiences. And some way that makes me feel better that someone is not alone.
And I think that goes to what you said before, like, am I the only one going through this? Because when you feel like you're the only one going through this and you're not speaking up about it, you're validating how you feel about that. So whether that's a bad feeling, you're like, I must be crazy. There must be something really wrong with me that I could actually sit in my car and eat a whole bucket of chicken, or I could follow my spouse down the road when I'm trying to figure out where they're going, or I can stay with this person that is not treating me the way I'm supposed to be treated. I know those are some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. And so you're not alone. You're not alone. And I think the importance is that we have this commonality and we understand that we're all humans and we all have struggles and we all have to work through it. And you can't do it on your own because sometimes you just can't.
And that's okay. And that's why God creates community. That's why God creates community and doctors and therapists and medication when needed. These are all resources that exist, and miracles come in all different kinds of forms. And as long as we open our minds to miracles looking differently, and it's not always just a snap of a finger, I think we can really grow. We're going to open it up to questions in just a second, but I just wanted you to touch on a couple of things that folks may be experiencing that are signals that we may need help.
Okay. I mentioned earlier not being able to get out of bed, or taking a longer time to get going in the morning compared to what you used to. If that lasts for a period of 2 weeks in a row, that's a sign that you're not feeling your best. Or if you're not doing things that you normally would do. So let's say you used to get up and eat breakfast and go work out and call your mom on the phone, and all of a sudden you're not doing that, and you're just getting up and you're just sitting on the couch and you're not getting going. What else? Weight gain is a sign, right? Or if you're doing things to help cope, right? So we all have our coping mechanisms. We all have things that we think make us feel better. And I think the pandemic also brought up some of those coping mechanisms because in the beginning, I know a lot of us I'll say I did. I would say, okay, I'm just going to have a glass of wine today, right? Because today's stressful. I've been in the house all day, and I think I'm going to have a glass of wine. And then you have a glass of wine tomorrow, and then you have a glass of wine the next day, and the next day. And when is too much too much? Maybe it's too much when you can't do anything until you have that glass of wine, or you can't talk to your kids without yelling at them until you have a glass of wine or a cigarette or weed or anything that you think makes you feel better or makes you feel better temporarily, right? So I think those are signs when your normal pattern of behavior begins to change in an unhealthy way.
Mine was waffles. That's when I realized, I was like, Jesus, I need some help again. I would get a good stack of waffles with butter and syrup right after the morning show. And I said, that was like around March and April. I said, oh, Jesus, I need some help because this isn't looking good right now.
Yeah.
We do want to open the floor if there's anyone that has a question or if anyone who has submitted a question. Again, this is family. If you don't want to stand up and ask a question, that's okay. You can write it down and you pass it along. But if there's anyone who has a question or something they'd like to share.
Good morning, and thank you to our panelists. We do have several questions. The first couple of questions center around supporting a loved one who may be dealing with mental illness, such as depression. How do you help a person in your household who has mental health issues but refuses to either take their medication or see their doctor, and as a result has frequent outbursts?
Support, listening to them. I think that there must be a reason why they don't want to take that medicine. Maybe the medicine that is prescribed is not the right one. Maybe it causes them side effects. Maybe they don't realize the importance of the medicine and what the medicine is supposed to do. And those are important points of education when someone is prescribed medicine, because sometimes when providers don't have enough time to explain that, then that gets lost in translation, and then the person thinks, well, I'm not taking this medicine because I've been taking it for 3 days and it's not working. It's not designed to work that way, most likely. Right? And so helping them to understand, when do we expect this medicine to actually work, and what do we expect it to do, and what do we think the side effects are going to be in the meantime as you're adjusting to it. Now, for the person who is trying to help support the family member, patience is a virtue, right? And not forcing your perspective on them, I think, is important, because when you force your perspective, then that's a conversation stopper, right? Rather than a conversation starter, to figure out what it is that they're going through that's causing them to be so edgy. Or usually when someone is having an outburst, that's because they're trying to say something. They're trying to get their point across, and they're not feeling heard, so.
Next question. How do you counsel someone who may be going through depression or someone who may be going through mental illness but thinks there is nothing wrong with them?
A lot of times we can't see our own behavior. And so if someone is referred to me that maybe their loved one is bringing them to me, I'll have them talk separately as to, why do you think you're here? What's going on? And then as I connect the dots, I help them to understand what it is that they could possibly be going through based upon what they've told me and what I think potential solutions could be. And so I try to connect the dots again so that they can see, okay, this is what you possibly could be experiencing, and you're not crazy, you're not less than what your self-worth is still good, even if you're having this challenge.
And our final question, After being diagnosed with a mental illness and medication has been prescribed, how long might it take before the person begins to feel better?
So that depends on the type of medication, to be honest. But I'll just talk about specifically antidepressants. So antidepressants are in a class of medicine usually that build up serotonin. So SSRIs, that's Prozac, Lexapro, Celexa, a host of number of medicines. But like I said earlier, with the candle wax burning down, so when you don't have enough of the chemical in your brain tries to make more. And when it tries to make more, but it can't get it, and you need the medicine to put it back, it takes time to what we call down-regulate the neurons. So the brain has to relax enough to accept the chemical. Okay, I'm trying to put it in layman's terms, and that's what takes time. That takes about 8 weeks. So I often tell people, okay, I'm going to give you this, take it today, and we're just going to act like we're not taking it. Okay, you just take it every day, and then we're in October, so October, November, December, around Christmas, you might not be so reactive. Around Christmas, maybe you won't be as tearful. Around Christmas, maybe you'll be able to put up your decorations and have more motivation. But until then, we're just gonna act like we're not taking it. And what's the alternative? If you didn't do that, then you would continue to feel like you feel now. And then there would be no light at the end of the tunnel, per se. But I try to give them terms or time frames that they can relate to. So that's for that medicine. But there's other medicine like what we call rescue medication. So for anxiety, those are what we call your Xanax, your Klonopin. Those are temporary medicines. Those are only medicines that should be used short term because they are highly addictive. But those are medicines that in the moment, if you're having a panic attack, that can slow down your heart rate and help you to breathe a little bit better. But like I said, that's a short-term solution.
Thank you so much for those questions. I know that those are questions that a lot of folks have on their minds. And again, the partnership of medication with therapy kind of helps you get to the root of the why, and then gives you a bridge, right, to be able to remember who you are and that, listen, we all deserve a joyful, abundant life. That's what God promised us, and that's what we deserve to have. And so let's not allow anything to get in the way of that. And so we are all here to reach out for help. God created all of us to be miracles for each other. And so that's what we can certainly do. Dr. Gomes, thank you so much for joining us. Please give her a round of applause, please. It's so important to remember that we are not in this alone. It's okay to reach out for help, and miracles come in all different types of forms, and you reminded us of that this morning, so thank you again. Well, this morning we want to move our conversation to talk about cardiovascular health and talking about prevention. This is another topic I'm really, really passionate about, and we're going to have someone who I consider a friend in the health and wellness space as well come up and talk to us about heart health. That's Dr. Ethelyn McQueen Gibson. She serves as an associate professor at Hampton University School of Nursing and the director of gerontology and minority aging. Her clinical research focuses on COVID-19 testing among underserved and or vulnerable populations. We know that is very important right now. She has practiced nursing for over 40 years to include clinical and administrative positions, and is a veteran, having served as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army Nurse Corps and on active and reserve duty. So she has had a very busy life. She serves on the Virginia Governor's COVID-19 Task Force for Long-Term Care and the State COVID-19 Vaccine Advisory Group. And would you look here, she is an active member of the greatest sorority in the land, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I know all the other sororities are giving me the side eye right now, but I have to show love for my sorors. Let's learn more about Dr. Gibson's mission.
Hello, my name is Dr. Ethelyn Gibson. I'm an associate professor from Hampton University School of Nursing, and I will be talking to you today about Go Red for Women, cardiovascular health. My topic is Have Faith in Heart. This is a call to action for women. Go Red for Women strives to inspire and empower women to take charge of their health by being aware and taking action to reduce their risk for heart disease and stroke. The Go Red for Women campaign is dedicated to helping women build healthy habits by including moving more, eating better, and managing their blood pressure, as well as closing the gender disparity gap by research and by looking at the STEM fields. Today, you will be listening to a talk that will help us talk about how to take that journey to better health. So here's what I want you to think about. Do you know that 1 in 5 women in the U.S. is not getting the recommended amount of physical activity under the federal guidelines? Number 2, about 50 million women have hypertension in the U.S. And number 3, about 45% of U.S. deaths caused by heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes are due to poor dietary habits. Today, we are going to tackle those topics so that the women today that are listening to my talk will leave with some strategies on how to live better, healthier lives. I look forward to talking to you and hope that you will leave with some better strategies. See you soon.
And we're seeing you right now. Everyone give Dr. Gibson a round of applause, please. We first met many years ago. We were talking about heart health, and really the biggest focus of that was prevention and how important it is for us to take steps now to protect our heart health. Why is this mission so important to you?
This mission is so important to me because we as women are always taking care of everyone else in the house except ourselves. And I'm going to say I'm guilty of that myself. And so that is why I said I just needed to stop on by the church and remind everybody else about that today.
And again, with the pandemic, it is so easy for us to forget about all the other ways we need to be taking care of ourselves. Obviously, we want to be safe with COVID-19 because that is a real threat. I know you've done a lot of work when it comes to that, but we also have to remember to take care of our heart health too. I started volunteering with the American Heart Association, which is how we met several years ago because of my own wellness journey. I was on a journey, lost 100 pounds because I was diagnosed with high blood pressure at 27 years old. And it was very scary for me when I understood what high blood pressure meant. Because I think sometimes in our community, we think because it's common, that makes it okay. But when I understood that, oh wow, high blood pressure can lead to heart disease, stroke, all of these other premature death. And I think that's the one time anxiety worked in my favor because I said, oh wow, I need to take care of this so I can be around for a long time. That's been a big part of your mission for us to understand what these things that are unfortunately can be prevalent in our community, what they mean for our overall health.
And I think that what happens in our community is that, and when I say our community, it's not just the Black community, it's all of our communities. We sometimes, especially as women, we think, oh, yes, I'm going to have high blood pressure. Or I go to the doctor and, yeah, my blood pressure's, it's a little high. It's 140/90. That's not good because every time it's a little over 130/90, think about your kidney. Because every time it's a little over that 130/90, it's ticking away at the blood vessels in your kidney. And that's not good. And if you're a mother and you have to take care of your children, if you're a grandmother and you want to see your grandchildren grow up, and if you are an auntie and you want to spend time with your nieces and your nephews, that makes a difference. It's not a good thing. And so that's why we have to do something about it. And so I am always on a mission to make sure that we educate ourselves about cardiovascular health as women. And so how do we make it simple? And so that's why I'm here today, so that we can make it simple. It's not rocket science. And so it's Life's Simple 7.
Life Simple 7.
Life's Simple 7.
Okay, tell us about Life Simple 7 so we can make sure we are around for our family and friends and all the moments we want to be alive for. Life Simple 7.
Okay, so what are the Simple 7? The Simple 7, number one, is that we first of all have to understand what is our blood pressure all about. So most of us, as everybody, what do the numbers mean? And so the American Heart Association actually wants us to know that it's not okay for your blood pressure to be above 130/90. And so many people will say, well, you know, my cousin's blood pressure is 140/90. That's not a good number. And just like we have been telling people, your professional is not the person at the beauty shop or the barber shop. It is not Pookie down at the corner drugstore.
Not Pookie.
No, not Pookie, okay? It needs to be a health professional. Number two, you need to track what your blood levels are. So that means that at some point in time, you need to visit a health professional. Now, if you don't have the money to go and see a doctor, we have many other ways to make sure that you can be seen by somebody who can take care of you, whether that is a community-free clinic, whether that is, we have federally qualified health centers in our communities, but we do have other ways that you can be seen by a healthcare provider. Number three, eating smart. And there are many ways. We now have, health, food pantries that are available. So those are available. Number four, moving smart. And that doesn't mean that you have to belong to a gym. That's something as simple as walking and moving, right? The next one, managing your weight. How do we do that? That's something as simple as, you know when your weight's not what it's supposed to be. And that doesn't mean you have to get on a scale. That means that you know when your clothes don't fit the way that they used to fit. And don't blame it on that you put something in, the washer.
In the dryer.
Okay, and something came out the wrong way. You know that you ate you ate the whole pack of donuts and you weren't supposed to do that. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it at that. Okay, don't smoke. There's just nothing good about it. Just give it up. And then sleeping, I don't sleep the way that I should, and all of us. So there's the Simple 7.
Okay, so we're taking notes on that, the Simple 7. We
Right.
can make sure we share that.
Yes.
And when we're talking about, because sometimes weight can feel very personal, right? And I
Right.
think that there is space to celebrate our bodies and who we are in this moment right now.
Right.
And love on ourselves by making good decisions one step at a time.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the food and the exercise
Yes,
piece.
yes.
Because sometimes we have felt, and even along my journey, people have asked me, what is the exact formula? Did you only eat seaweed? And what kind of workout specifically did you do? And again, this is an evolving journey. I lost 100 pounds, and then you go up a little because of waffles and the pandemic, right?
Right.
And you just, it's a continuing journey. But really, the main things I did at the start was, and I made a promise to God that I would eat better and exercise more. So what did that look like? I cut out a lot of processed foods and focused more on fruits, veggies, and lean meats. and I walked. I went to Mount Trashmore, that's one of my favorite places, and I started walking a few times a week. That built up over time, but that's how I started, and I think I lost the first 50 pounds that way. And I didn't put pressure on myself to lose a certain amount in a certain time frame. I was on my blood pressure medication, and so I was throwing everything out at it. I was, Jesus help me, taking the medication, walking more, and eating better. And there's no complicated formula. Like you said, it's simple.
Well, it's not a complicated formula, but here's the thing. When we talk about heart health for our families, and especially for ourselves as women, in order to take care of ourselves as women, God gave us a very good formula. We must get up in the morning and break the fast. Breakfast. Now, that means that you must get up before 8 o'clock in the morning. Before 8 o'clock in the morning, and we do get up before 8 o'clock in the morning, but we do everything for everyone else in the morning except ourselves. We feed our children, we start our jobs, we do everything else, but we must take care of feeding our bodies. And so even if that means that you're getting up in the morning and you're starting a job, and some people may have seen when I came in here this morning, I had a little goodie bag. And in my little goodie bag, I actually had a small carb, I actually had a little yogurt, and I had a little fruit. And actually, that is how I started to break my fast in the morning to feed my body. And that actually fed my brain so that I got my body going. Now, that didn't start out, that's not how I started out. But that's how I had to feed my soul so that then I could feed you the information that I'm feeding you today. And I had to learn how to do that because let me tell you, I'm going to be transparent because probably, I'm going to say about 15 years ago, this body was probably about 30 pounds heavier than it was today. And so I can't preach this message to you if I didn't learn how to walk that journey, if I didn't learn how to walk that journey and do it the same. So this is what you have to do. 3 times a day, you have to feed this temple and you have to take care of this temple so that you send a message to this brain to push out the insulin that then pushes that metabolism, and then that metabolism then begins to say, you know what, let me rev it up so that then I can start doing what the Lord really wants this body to do. And then it does all those wonderful things to take care of it. And then it helps to keep down your blood pressure. And then the other things that we need to do also as women, we need to fight the stress. So that's the other thing. So let me tell you some healthy things that you can do without medicine.
You mean it's not eating the stack of waffles with butter and syrup? It's not that.
Well, it's not that either. Okay, so also we also will be uploading some things to the website, and also inside some of the packets that every single woman has today, it talks about some things too. We just need to slow down our lives. How about that? How about saying no to some things sometimes? Because people are going to keep calling us. And I know, I think Jessica's going to say that sometimes we have to say the N-O word. And we don't always say no. Sometimes we have to hit the snooze button. The snooze button. And then number 3, here's another thing. And it's actually on my little paper here from the American Heart Association. It says, let worry go. It's part of the medicine. And then laugh it up, number 4. Oh my goodness. And then the other thing that we have tried to learn during the pandemic is to get connected with each other. Get connected. I've started calling some girlfriends that I have not been connected with for a minute. And some cousins. Now, this is when you want to call Pookie.
Not for blood pressure advice.
Not for the blood pressure advice, but, it's okay to gossip a little bit because it's good for the soul. Because I do want to know what's going on with the other Pookie, okay? Now, and then you want to get organized. And then, number 7, practice giving back. And then number 8, be active. Now, every Monday, I do put on my do not disturb on my phone. And the money that I used to go out for dinner, I do give it to my personal trainer because he's kind of cute. My husband knows he's kind of cute. And I get my exercise on because that's good for my soul. And then lastly, I lean into the things that I can change because that's the medicine that is going to help me stay healthy that I don't need a blood pressure pill for. So that's the recipe.
And that's something we can all do. Mm-hmm. And it's something else I want to share, and I know this is, it's a grim statistic. Actually, I think it's hopeful. I know you've probably shared this in your work with the Heart Association, and something that really, really, really struck home with me is that 80% of the deaths due to cardiovascular disease, 80% could have been prevented with lifestyle changes. You think about that, 80%. How many moms, dads, grandpas, grandmothers, cousins, aunts, sisters, friends, brothers, uncles, think about how many of them could still be here today by taking these steps. In the grand scheme of things, these are simple steps that we can take to save our own lives and be here to take care of the people we love, to enjoy life, and to serve out the mission that God has given us, right? It's a statistic that you sit with, but it's also, I think, hopeful, because that means in this moment right now, we can start making better decisions that will give us a better chance of being here to enjoy this life. When you share that message, and I know you have as well, do you think about that too, about how many people who could still be here if we take these simple steps?
Well, the statistic is that we as women must take care of each other. So every woman in this room needs to reach out to another woman and say, have you made the appointment to go and see your internal medicine physician or your family practice physician this year? Because how many of us have canceled a doctor's appointment? Now, when you were having babies, you never canceled an appointment to go and get your pap smear. You never canceled it. When you were pregnant, having your babies, you always went in when it was time to have that appointment. You never canceled it. When your children had their appointments, you never canceled the appointment. But now, it's okay, I'm gonna cancel it. No, it's not okay. It's not. You can't be too busy. Because the statistic is that 1 in 5 women is at risk of having a stroke. 1 in 5. And then we're at risk because we've taken birth control pills. Among Black women, we are at the highest prevalence of having strokes. Black women. So that means the majority of these women that are here in this room. And because many of us have been at risk of having preeclampsia while we are pregnant. And because many of us have also been on hormone replacement therapy. So that's a very alarming statistic. And then many of us sitting in this room will say, I have migraines. So I know you're sitting here thinking, that's me. So if that's you, and you have not gone to your internist this year for your checkup, and you don't know what your blood pressure is, this message is for you today. And you need to know what your blood pressure is. And if it is not lower than 130/90, and then you're not doing all of those other things, we need to be taking better care of each other.
Can you also talk about the importance of taking blood pressure medication? I say that because sometimes we're like, oh, I'll take it, or, oh, I started walking more, I don't need to worry about it, or it'll be fine. So many of my family and friends have high blood pressure and they are fine. But high blood pressure is also called the silent killer. So can we talk about the importance of, yes, we want to change and continue healthy lifestyle choices and all those factors, but taking the medication is very important.
Taking the medication is important, but I have had many conversations with women that say, I'm going to pray it through. And that is good. But if you want to pray it through, then let's talk about making the changes, and then you can come off of the medication if you make those changes. So let's talk about those 7 changes. So make the 7 changes. Start the walking. Lose the weight. Change your diet. Make the lifestyle changes and hold each other accountable. So I will say, when I was 195 pounds, I'm going to use me. I knew I needed to lose the 30 pounds. I knew I needed to start eating 3 times a day if I wanted to come off the medication. And then I could make the changes. And then I could pray it through and come off the medication. So that's how you pray it through and come off. But you cannot come off the medication and then put yourself at risk of having a stroke. Because then that means that I am no longer in the lives of my children, my grandchildren, my community. You have to hold each other accountable. And you can't stand on the sidelines and let your sister friend do the wrong thing. And see, we as a community have to stand up like we used to stand up as a community. And see, we know when our sister friends are not doing what they should be doing. And we as women have to do better. We have to do better. And so when we talked about, I think the speaker before us talked about mental health. Part of mental health is saying the hard things to each other, right? And so we have to do that for each other. And we have to come along, and I know it's the time of the pandemic, so we have to pick up the phone, and we have to envelop each other, and we have to say, I know you're going through, and so let's talk about, can I talk you through going to the doctor? And I think our next speaker is going to say, take each other to the doctor, but we have to do that. Because this is too important. We don't want to lose another sister to COVID. We don't want to lose another sister to a stroke because they didn't take care of their blood pressure.
And you, with COVID, that is a huge mission for you as well. Mm-hmm. And we know that our community, especially in the Black community, has suffered exponentially from poor outcomes from COVID, from deaths from COVID. And it also, links to our state of health. We know we have vaccines, which are very important to help preventing us from severe outcomes of COVID. But we've also seen the literature about those who may have hypertension or diabetes uncontrolled that exacerbate poor outcomes when it comes to COVID. So in this mission for you to educate people with testing and how to take care of ourselves, these missions are overlapping for you at this point because we have to be healthy in order to remain healthy in this pandemic.
Yes, and we do know that communities that are at higher risk for comorbidities of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, stroke, are at higher risk for COVID-19. And so it is the mission also for the American Heart Association that those communities are, that we have those diseases under control. And so we want to be sure that communities of color do not have high blood pressure. And so, again, especially women. And so we are here today to make sure that women are keeping their blood pressure or that they are not even at risk. And so, again, inside your packet, many women do not understand what are the categories of high blood pressure. So, just like when you are at the stoplight, there is high, medium, and low. So you have the red light, the green light, the yellow light. And so inside of your packet, we have what's called stage 1, 2, and hypertensive crisis. Yes. And so if I have a woman that tells me that her blood pressure is 180/90, they might be walking around and they could be sitting on the stage with me. And they would say, I'm good. Wow. That's not good. And somebody might be sitting out here today saying that that's good. That's not good. And they might even be sitting out in the audience today and they might be unvaccinated. And that really puts them at very high risk. What we would say is that's a double whammy. So again, understanding why it's important in our community to have your blood pressure under control, your diabetes under control. If you happen to have asthma, having that asthma under control, that is so important, especially in our community, because we don't want to lose another generation that can make a difference in our community.
I think the biggest message from this conversation is, because it can feel overwhelming, right? It's like, okay, I got to do all these things, but these are simple decisions we can take one day at a time. And if you look at the list of lifestyle changes like, okay, man, I've got a lot to do. It's okay. You take one thing at a time. This week I'm going to make sure that I get in 150 minutes of exercise, which is what the Heart Association says. It's not like, okay, I got to work out 2 hours every day. Think about that. If you spread 150 minutes of walking out throughout the course of a week, that's 30 minutes here, 20 minutes there, 40 minutes. These are all things that we can do to make sure that we are here and healthy and happy, which is most important because we want to see each other grow and succeed in this life. I know there are some questions, I believe, for Dr. Gibson, and you have been so incredible. So let's get to some of the questions this morning when we talk about heart health and making sure that we are here healthy and happy.
Thank you to our panelists for a rich discussion around being heart healthy. You sparked several questions among our audience and those online. The first question is, if you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure, how often should you be taking your blood pressure?
You should be taking your blood pressure on a daily basis. We typically ask that you take your blood pressure in the morning when you rise. That is the best time to take your blood pressure. It is best to take it on the weekend because that's a different time when you usually are not as busy. And then it's usually best then to, then take it during the week because that's usually your normal time. So first thing in the morning when you rise, Monday through Friday, because you're usually, that's your usual work schedule, and then one time on the weekend.
Is blood pressure or blood work the only or main indicators for heart health issues?
No, that's not the only indication of heart issues. That's why we recommend that you should see a physician at least twice per year. That's why, because going to see that physician, we would actually then draw blood work. So that's when we talk about check, change, and control. So we would then be looking at your cholesterol level. We would be looking at what we call your complete blood count, because we also look at those blood levels. And then we would also be listening to your heart, because that would also allow us to hear if there are also some changes going on. And we would also then do what we call an EKG, because that would also help us to see if there are some changes in your heart.
Talk to us about how yo-yo dieting affects your heart health.
Yo-yo dieting is never good for your heart. That's why Jessica and I talked about that it is really best, that the natural method is the best. Eating 3 meals a day, walking, having the support of your community, having the support of your family and your friends, that is really the best. Yo-yo dieting takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of time, but consistent support is really the best.
So when you go to the doctor, they often tell you if you're a certain height, you should be a certain weight. Is this normal? Because all of us have different DNA makeups.
That is true. There typically has been a height and a weight chart that many doctors go by. But one of the things that I have always prescribed myself to, and I also have been a certified diabetes nurse educator. But what I do in the community is I teach by, again, eating a healthy diet. That's what's most important. Fruits and vegetables. Your diet needs to have nice, rich, beautiful colors. But one of the things in our communities is that we need to have grocery stores. And in many of our in many of our communities, they are food deserts. And so we are doing our best to make sure that we have grocery stores in our communities. And so we are trying to advocate that we have those grocery stores, and we're still fighting for those in many of our communities. Of course, right here in Newport News, we're still fighting for those. So everybody that's here today, we're still fighting for those grocery stores.
Thank you. What relevance does high cholesterol have on one's heart? Is it important to take medication, and doesn't our bodies need some cholesterol?
Our bodies do need some cholesterol, and that's why we talk about the happy cholesterol and the bad cholesterol. But why are we concerned about cholesterol? I'm going to keep it simple. What does cholesterol do? If you have a blood vessel, what that cholesterol does is just like if you have a car. The cholesterol is like that oil. It gunks up your blood vessel, and then it will clog it. And then that is why we become concerned that you can have a heart attack, and it stops the pumping of the blood through your heart. So that is why we say that you can't have too much of the bad cholesterol going through your heart. So that is why we need to have you going to your doctor at least twice a year so that we can check those blood levels. If you are going to the doctor, we would have that conversation with you about the happy cholesterol and the bad cholesterol, and we would have that conversation. But again, if you come and talk to Dr. Gibson and your physician, we're going to have that check with you so that we can educate you and have a little bit more of a conversation.
Please share with us the symptoms of chronic kidney disease.
So the symptoms of chronic kidney disease, let's think of a way to make that pretty simple. If you keep your blood pressure in check, we won't have to have that conversation. I think a lot of people call Dr. Gibson Dr. Mom. So let's put it this way. If we make sure that you keep your blood pressure below 120/80, then we won't have to have that conversation. You will never, ever have to be in a dialysis chair. I don't want anybody in this room ever in a dialysis chair. So let's make sure that we are keeping our blood pressure where it needs to be, because everybody here is going to leave with the message that our blood pressure needs to remain below 120/80, or definitely below 130/90, because we are going to take this message today to one other sister when we leave from out of here today. And kidney disease actually starts because we don't share our message with somebody else in our community.
And our final question from a member of our audience. I had postpartum cardiomyopathy 16 years ago after giving birth. Does that increase my chances of future heart failure? And what are some things I can do presently to prevent any future heart problems?
So to repeat the question, you had cardiomyopathy after having a baby. So my recommendation to whoever posed that question is that I would hope that whoever your obstetrician is that they had you follow up with an internal medicine physician, I would hope, because you should be having follow-up with that internal medicine physician, and then follow up from that internal medicine physician with a cardiologist.
Thank you so much. I know a lot of questions, and at the end of the day, we all just want to make sure we have the information and tools we need to be able to take care of ourselves. Dr. Gibson, thank you so much for offering the very straightforward advice, our simple steps. Anything you want to leave with folks who are watching today about what's the number one thing, if somebody wanted to take action today to improve their health, what's the number one thing they should do today?
I think the number one thing today is that I think for all of us as women today is that we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves first. We as women must take care of ourselves first before we take care of anyone else. And that is always very hard. It is always very hard. I will say that it's very hard for me myself. So let's remember life's simple 7. Life's simple 7. And sometimes that means that in the morning, when you get up while you are having your coffee, go back in the bathroom and close the door with your coffee. And even if that means that somebody is knocking on your door, put your do not disturb back on. Okay, put your do not disturb on your phone and say, I'm not answering it, okay? And do these things for yourself. I have to do it for me. I had to do it this morning. My husband was knocking back on the door. He thought I was crazy, okay? But I had to do this for myself. And I put my snooze back on and I got my other 30 minutes.
I don't blame you.
Okay? Because it will save your life. And you need to do these things so that you will save your life, so that you can save somebody else. And do these things so that you can keep living. That is my message. And that is how I keep doing what I keep doing for the community, because I keep doing these Life Simple 7 so that I can keep using the gift that God has given me to keep giving to you. That's what's important, to keep saving this heart that God has given me.
Please give Dr. Gibson a round of applause, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you. We are having such great conversations here today. We're so grateful for everyone who is here with us at Ivy Baptist Church and our family that's joining us online. And so we're going to move the conversation now to our seasoned community. You're going to know what I mean in just a moment. We want to welcome Vanessa Hill. She's the founder and executive director of Project Nana. It's a nonprofit that is focused on engagement, training, advocacy, and empowerment of seasoned women's health. She's an author, healthcare consultant, and holistic coach. Vanessa has received honors in patient and community community engagement from Centera Healthcare, selected as a patient advocate and legislative advocate by the Society of Gynecologic Oncology, and received the Center for Medicare Advocacy's Alfred A. Chiplin Award for Civility and Social Justice. Her research and Aging Women's Health program has been published in a featured chapter in Older Women and Wellbeing, A Global Perspective, Volume 1. Let's learn more about Vanessa Hill and Project Nana.
Good morning. Good morning. The topic of my nanologue is "And Still I Rise." It started with a rash on my stomach. Then it moved to my arms. And I thought I was having an allergic reaction. So I went to my primary care physician, and she didn't really know what it was, so she sent me to a dermatologist. I was told just needed some cream, and then it would get better soon, but it didn't. The rash got worse, and I began having pain. The rash spread to my arms and my legs, but not my face nor my back. I was seen in the emergency room. They performed all types of tests on me, and finally the result of the CAT scan revealed there was calcification in my abdomen. I didn't understand what was going on. Here I am, a nurse, dedicated to serving others and making sure my patients go to the doctor. Prevention is what I stress, but I was dumbfounded when the diagnosis came back as cancer, stage 4. And it started as ovarian cancer. That made no sense to me, as I had completed a complete hysterectomy 25 years prior to. I want you to hear what I just said. A complete hysterectomy. But some cells were left behind that were malignant. I started chemotherapy for the 3rd time 2 weeks ago. God got me in his precious hands because this is my 3rd time wrestling with this disease. And I did mention that I am a nurse, right? Well, you might be saying, how did I know? How didn't I know? Yes, I was bloated. I asked my doctor about that, and they said it was from a hiatal hernia. I had acid reflux. I thought it was a result of the hernia, but all along it was cancer. At first, I started feeling real sorry for myself. Depression tried to overtake me. I was overwhelmed. But God, see, I know that God is a very present help in the time of trouble. I know he never will leave me nor forsake me. I know that through it all, bless the Lord at all times. I know that he's keeping me. I know that he knows every hair on my head and every cell in my body. He knew that I was a warrior. Such a time for this. And I have been a warrior. So I no longer see myself as a patient. I see myself as a physician, apprentice under Dr. Jesus. I stand here bearing witness to his grace. I stand here bearing witness to his joy. I stand here bearing witness to his mercy. Right now in faith, I believe that I am God's surgical instrument, performing surgery and removing all of your doubts by the might of the Holy Spirit, removing your fears, your depression, and there will be an implementation of trust that will take hold of you. And I'm asking you to join with me and know that we are yet alive and still again would rise.
There's a part of me that just wants to help somebody. I could never figure out what my calling was, what God wanted me to do.
Okay.
And I know what He wants me to do is to get out there and to do just what I'm doing now. Tell my story, to tell them don't give up. Don't give up no matter what you do, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how depressed you get, no matter, if you feel like you're all alone, you're not. All you gotta do is just look to God. He will see you through, and you have to have the faith that you can make it. You can't have a pity party.
We share that video with you because it really speaks to Vanessa's mission and to honor the woman who you just heard from. Tell us about the video we just watched, and we know you lost her recently.
Yes, that video is something that we do. It's called nanologues, the vagina monologues for older women. Because sometimes you can tell people about a statistic, you can tell them why they should go to the doctor so they can be healthy, but they have to really put a personal aspect to it in order to really kind of make it plain. So when we do nanologues for a variety of different women's health issues, that's how we do it. So they tell me their story and I write it, or I write from a variety of different stories. Miss Janet Blunt, we needed to tell her story because we always used to hear women say, oh, well, I had a hysterectomy. I don't need to go to the gynecologist anymore. And we needed to let people know that you still have to take care of your body, and that there's more than just, when you're talking about a hysterectomy, a uterus, there's more than just a cervix, there's more than just fallopian tubes, ovaries. How many of us even realize that there's vaginal cancer, vulva cancer? So you still need to go, even for a higher quality of life. You can still get palpated even without any of those organs. But like she said, having been a nurse for 35 years, having had an oophorectomy, when I say that, that means no ovaries, no fallopian tubes, as well as a hysterectomy, no uterus, no cervix, she thought, oh, I don't need to go. She kept going to other doctors, but never went to her gynecologist. And sometimes when we go to primary care, they are rightly concerned about cardiovascular issues, diabetes, respiratory issues, and that they don't really have a lot of time to go into some of the gynecologic care or questions to elicit responses that would say we need to do further investigation. So she didn't go. A nurse taking care of everybody else, not taking care of herself. And so when she had certain symptoms, as she said, she thought it was just something in her digestion. Then she got rashes. She went to every single doctor, gastroenterologist, dermatologist, until she finally exhausted other doctors and said, oh, maybe gynecology. And she ended up with stage 4 cancer of the ovarian cancer with no ovaries. How is that? Because in rare instances, you can have it in the lining of where the fallopian tubes were. It's the peritoneal, and that's the cancer that she had. So ovarian cancer without ovaries. And so we had to really have her story in order to get people just to listen.
A lot of what you do with Project Nana is celebrating our seasoned women. Mm-hmm. She let me know very early, she said, we don't say older, it's seasoned. And you're right, absolutely. Celebrating our seasoned women and reminding the seasoned women in our lives that we have to make sure we're going to the doctor, we're getting our screenings, and that we do not discard the seasoned women in our lives, because that's just when another beautiful part of your life is is getting started. The joy and excitement that should be surrounding that, taking on new adventures. I have to give my mom a shout out here. She's 67, she's in the audience, and she's a retired school teacher, but now taking on a completely different life and making sure she's going to the doctors and getting her checkups. But we have to make sure we're doing that for the seasoned women in our lives, and not just because there's a certain age on the calendar that we are discarding or throwing away the people we should be celebrating most and wanting to make sure their health is in tip-top shape, and making sure we're talking about vaginal health. And you say the basement, the basement issues, because those things should not be discarded just because there's a certain number on the calendar.
Absolutely. And I know that our previous speaker wanted to make sure that we call the anatomy what the anatomy is. But a section of when we do our workshops, we do title it basement issues. But when we're talking about that, of course, it's everything below the belt. You know, we make sure that we say vagina. I can remember sitting and listening on the porch when my Nana and her friends were on the porch gossiping, and I was listening because, you know, children should be seen and not heard. And I heard them talk about everything, but I never heard the word vagina. I never heard the word even bleeding. Someone becomes a woman. But how does that happen? We don't talk about those things. So what we are trying to do is normalize conversations. We don't even say reproductive health. We say it's women's health or gynecologic organs. Reproduction is a season, but you were born with these organs, and God willing, you will continue to have them until you transition on. And so we're very intentional about what we say, and making certain that women are not afraid to say these words. Because even saying private parts means these are conversations or things that you shouldn't be talking about, and that is what is killing our women.
Let's talk about vaginal health, because we were talking before we came out here earlier about the age that certain cancers are happening, and how many of our seasoned women can either think they don't need to go to the gynecologist or discouraged from getting screenings often because they're out of the reproductive phase of their lives. But that's not the case in the certain age range of when we're seeing more ovarian cancers, different cancers like that. Talk about why it's so important to make sure they're advocating for themselves to get screenings regularly, and why it's so important they still go even though they have graduated from the reproductive phase.
Okay, first I want to say what seasoned is, right? And there is no, people don't agree. So when you're talking about somehow the mafia that's known as AARP finds every woman once they turn 50.
The mafia.
So AARP will say 50 years old. The CDC, and that's for someone who is an older adult, right? The CDC says 55. But of course, Medicare will deem that at 65. So for Project Nana, what we're doing, we just go by 55. So when we're talking about menopause or postmenopausal women, you tend to think there's no need to talk about or continue any type of screening or surveillance of your vaginal health. However, did you know that the average age for most gynecologic cancers is 63? I just wanted to say 63. And so what we do know is, yes, they do happen in younger women. And that is probably what gets more publicity, because when it comes to our seasoned women, we don't want to think about them or think about in any terms their vaginal health or sexuality or anything. But yes, 63 is the average age. Mm-hmm.
And I bet a lot of us did not know that. And it's so important for us to know, for our women who are of seasoned age, but also for those of us who have seasoned women in our lives, to remind them, hey, I know you may not have gone to the gynecologist in a while. it's time to go and get the screenings. You know, we talk about making sure we are informed. You started this project for a very specific reason. Tell us about why you started Project Nana.
Okay, I think a lot of us, we come in homes that may be multi-generational, whether or not you're from the South or Caribbean. And so my grandparents raised me, you know, so I was very, very close. But in 2010, my grandmother died 2 weeks after diagnosis of stage 4 cancer of the uterus. And I missed her by a day. Imagine that. I mean, she was my everything, and I missed her by a day. Having been a breast cancer survivor at 70, yes, women that are 70, you know, but over 65 are more prevalent with that, except you're seeing more folks, well, they're more likely to die with breast cancer. She didn't. My grandfather actually found the lump for her. I'll let that sit.
We're going to talk about that part later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that part later. You know, so she was a breast cancer survivor. But even going to the oncologist on a regular basis, to the gerontologist, no one knew that she had this cancer raging inside of her. Google was my first form of research, and I understood that it was symptomatic uterine cancer, meaning that any type of post-menopausal bleeding is a really red flag. So, A, she knew she was bleeding, but why didn't she say anything? B, when she went to the primary care, why wasn't anyone checking her other than, you know, checking for anything, again, below the belt? I know my mother said at one point she saw something when she took her to the restroom one time, but my grandmother just shushed her up and wouldn't want to talk about it. What I knew was silence was deadly. What I knew was if she understood that first sign of blood, she could have had a hysterectomy, and she would probably, her chances of living would have been higher. She would not have kept it for so long. It had to have been happening for a while for it to get to stage 4. Uterine cancer is the most prevalent gynecologic cancer, but it's, you know, they have really good outcomes if you catch it early. So I wanted to make sure that having had the opportunity to be in film, I understood how to tell a narrative. I was able to take all of my skill sets and my talents, and I just had to advocate and to tell it. And so when we said Project Nana, yes, that's personal from me, from my Nana, Merlise Yvonne McIntosh Henderson, I speak her name. But other people couldn't really resonate with that term, Nana. And that it's incumbent on all of us to take our seasoned women, to tell them to go, to encourage them to go, but for us to empower ourselves so that we can empower them to tell them the why. You know, going to the doctor just to say, yes, I need to go because this is good for my health is one thing. But actually making someone go, it has to have a why. And I know if she didn't have an opportunity to see her great-grands, and if she knew that she would be able to, you know, see someone's wedding that had just happened, maybe if she had a better understanding of the why we still needed her, she would have taken that extra step. But it meant that it needed to be some form of education and empowerment for her. And at that time, she didn't have it. I said I couldn't save her. So I wanted to be able to save everyone else's Nana. And in that, I chase Nana every day.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I think some of us are starting to tear up because we think about those people in our lives that we have loved, and the stigma that can come along with wanting to be open about the personal issues that we face, and especially, you know, the women in our lives who hold the title Nana, right? and they have shouldered so much in their lives to support our families that when it's issues that they face themselves, they're afraid to share it with us because they still want to, I think, be the rock, and especially when it comes to vaginal health. You know, I'm sure you've racked your brain, like, was she embarrassed to talk about it? Did she think it would just go away? In the ruminating in your mind that you've done, you know, since your Nana has passed away, what do you think it was that kept her from raising the issue?
You know, the interesting part is when she found out she had breast cancer, and like I said, she was 70, she became the person in the community to talk to any younger person or any other person who got their first diagnosis. They would always come to Miss Lisi, and she would tell them what to expect and what to go through. So she was an advocate, so, you know, she put that in me. What I do understand is that her road to health and, you know, her road as a warrior was very hard. When she had breast cancer and they found it, it was stage 3. So she went through chemotherapy, radiation, and she lost her hair and all of that. So it must have been very difficult. I know that as our seasoned women, as I've noted of women, period, we seem to shoulder everyone else's burden. So I understand that she had to be thinking of the economic burden. She had to be thinking about what it meant for her once again to put her children through something, at least in her mind, because it's always, how can I make sure everybody else is okay? But what I realize is that and maybe I shouldn't feel this way, but because they never put a ceiling on or a lot of barriers on what I could talk to them about. I used to talk to them about everything. If I knew, then I would have been able to convince her, right? So I think it was a lack of education on her part, and not that she was not educated, but just we don't talk about, you know, vaginal health in seasoned women. So I think she didn't really know, and she probably thought it was going to be too hard, and she was tired. I imagine that would happen, but the guilt that I feel is I was the last one to take her to the doctor, and because she had a cough that she couldn't shake. And I'm just like, if the x-ray was just a little bit lower. So, you know, this is the reason why we developed Take Nana to the Doctor Day, or to the Doctor Week during Women's Cancer Awareness Month, which was in September. She died September 30th, so you imagine this is a hard week. So that we can empower, whether it's the children or the grandchildren or the partner or a friend, so that if that person, that seasoned woman, won't do it for herself, that we can continue again to be able to lovingly encourage them to look for the signs, symptoms, and go to a gynecologist and get checked.
I think it's almost a beautiful circle of life that the seasoned women in our lives have done so much by putting us first, making sure the children and the grandchildren, the nieces and nephews, that everybody else is okay. That's a small way that we can say thank you for covering us and protecting us all those years, to say, you know what, I'm gonna make sure you get to the gynecologist, I'm gonna sit with you and call and make the appointment with you. If you want me to go, I'll go drop you off. Do you need me to wait in the waiting room with you? Can I go inside with you to make sure you're asking these questions? These are things that we can do, and what you've created is such a beautiful nod to your Nana that helps us make sure that our Nanas are okay. So I just want to thank you for doing that, because I know that can't always be easy. But you're letting her legacy live on by making sure our Nanas are around. I think we're getting a little teary up here, because we think about the people we love, and we just want to do what we can to make sure they're okay. Let's talk about vaginas. Everybody's like, oh Lord, the news lady said vagina. Yes, because we have them and it's important to make sure we take care of them. Do you think that that's a part of kind of like the taboo, like, oh my God, I can't believe I actually said that word, but it's a part of our anatomy. It's a part of who we are. And we have to make sure our health is in order. So especially for seasoned women, we should still be going to the gynecologist once the calendar says 50, and regularly, not just every so often.
Absolutely. The word vagina, I remember when we had our first workshop, it was a whole bunch of wonderful church folks that came to our workshop. They were like, what is this? And my very first exercise is to ask them if they ever saw the movie Candyman. And they said, Candyman? It's like, yeah, because I want you to look in the mirror some days, or just right now look at me and let's just say vagina. And so I made them say vagina 7 times. And then they were looking, but it started off low and then they started off saying it with pride. One of the things that we talked about is that it is not a taboo word. And one of the things that I said is we need to take the sacred out of vagina. Not morally speaking, not talking about any type of religion, but what we're saying is it is a part of the anatomy. And just as you wouldn't walk around with and not take care of a cut on your arm, because it could get infected, why would you not take care of if you see a bump or if you have an itch or if something's going on? Why would you not be able to talk about it and say, hey, I need to figure out what's going on. So, a vagina. We need to make certain that first, if we're going to say we're going to take them and we're going to talk to them about what a vagina is, we have to show them where it is. So, because people were just like, oh yeah, that's my vagina. What are you pointing to? Are you talking about a vulva? And so part of what we do is also go through the anatomy, and this is because a lot of us don't realize that the vagina is the canal and that the outside that you're seeing is the vulva, right? A lot of us don't realize that there's different ways and different mechanisms, in order to take better care of it. For example, your vagina needs to be palpated. Meaning, when you're going to the doctor, a gynecologist, they're going to go up there and they're going to go and feel to make sure that there are no bumps. They're going to be able to feel your uterus, making sure that there are no fibroids. They're going to be able to feel. That's palpating. That's different than a pap smear. Did you guys know that? Okay, a pap smear is actually a screening that is where they take a swab from your cervix to see whether or not you have the human papillomavirus. Did you know? HPV. So some people, once they reach a certain age, it all depends whether you go with the American College of Gynecologists or the U.S. Task Force of Prevention, which is mostly internists. Internists are not gynecologists. 2 different things. Some will say, oh, at a certain age, you don't need to get a pap smear anymore. Well, people are thinking, oh, that means I don't need to get a pelvic exam. 2 different things. A pap smear is something that happens within a pelvic exam. 2 separate things. So ladies, they need to go. I think you need to go annually. ACOG says you need to go annually. Society of Gynecological Oncologists say you need to go annually. But guess what? Medicare, once you hit 65, says no, every 2 years. But what did I just tell you? What's the average age of gynecologic cancer?
63.
Right. So why, when you get older, are they now some more barriers for you to be able to go and get checked out? So when we're talking to women, we're telling them why they need to take care of it, what they need to take care of it. And now what we have found is that we're trying to reduce a lot of the barriers in terms of even finding a gynecologist that will accept them.
Wow. that will, why? See, stuff like that makes me upset. But no, wow, because they're of the seasoned age, they may be turned down by some gynecologists.
Yes, and it's not that gynecologists will say, you know what, I don't believe because you're age that you need to be seen. It comes down to Medicare. There's less reimbursement for Medicare and Medicaid, if we're really, honest about it, than it is for private insurance. So when we thought we were doing something, having the workshops, those ladies who were like, why are we here? A little while later, I had to say, now y'all can go home. They didn't want to go because now they felt that they had been receiving all this information, and we were sending them out, and we were having an army of women going to the gynecologist, and we received calls. They won't accept new patients with Medicare. Or we've heard stories, they've discharged me from my gynecologic practice. So what happens is if they're a private gynecology practice, they can refuse to take people with Medicare, and we found that has been part of the problem. And so it's forcing women to go to only primary care, and if they don't talk about it, take notes and empower themselves and make certain that their primary care is asking the questions, then they may not get that gynecologic care at all. So what we're trying to do is to find other gynecologists, and we're putting together NANA-certified centers where you have gynecologists that will say, I will see people with Medicare. But with that, also, that means if you're looking for seasoned women, there are all kinds of reasons why women may not want to go to a gynecologist. They won't accept me, insurance. B, my knees, or as we like to call Arthur is just making it too hard. I can't see myself sitting up on that table. There are actually tables that start off as chairs, motorized chairs, that if your doctor's office is really trying to pull out the welcome wagon to folks who have other abilities or are seasoned, that they start off as chairs and they can come up and become that exam table to make it easier. So all of these things are things that we're trying to teach our women so that they understand how to empower themselves to break down some of the barriers for them to go.
If they run into a situation where they're either being let go by a practice or they're having difficulty finding a practice, I know you're working to put together a list. What are the other options other than really asking your general practitioner to make sure that they are also checking?
Well, I know that locally here in Virginia, we have been in early on discussions with some of the nursing schools, universities have nursing, and we are so grateful for the nurse practitioners, because you can have women's health providers that are not just gynecologists, right? Or not just physicians. Nurse practitioners are wonderful in the state of Virginia. They can have their own practices as well. So what we are in early conversations with is to be able to have, whether or not they're students practicing under a nurse practitioner or a physician, to be able to have that annual women's exam. So we're not saying you have to go, every 6 months, but it's still that annual exam for them to go. Other than trying to find a practice, asking friends. This is another reason why we need to be able to have our seasoned women talk about more than just, how's the weather? To have conversations. Hey, do you know who will see us? And then it's still pushing our primary care. Hey, we need to actually do an exam, but you have to ask, when's the last time you've palpated, a vagina? You have to ask that because, you have to make sure that they can actually be the first line of defense or the gatekeeper and feel something. But in a longer term thing, this is when it comes down to us advocating for legislation. If we are like right now, there's a legislation that is going on that will reduce payments for surgical procedures, surgeons as well as physicians. 9% cut additional cut from Medicare reimbursements. How many more people will then say, I'm not going to take people with Medicare? And then you're adding on it the specialists who are the gynecologists, you know. So it is about really advocating for oneself through local, you know, going into a practice, and then also we have to become warriors and really get out there and advocate for legislation as well.
This is such an important topic, and I know there are some questions, and we're going to get to those in just a moment, but I want to touch on this because you said it was your grandfather
Yes.
who noticed the lump in Nana. Now, grandfather was not a gynecologist, and so let's talk about how that happened.
Well, when we're talking about the vagina for seasoned women, we're not just talking about them taking care of it just for the sake of making sure I don't have cancers. And I'm not saying anything about my granddaddy. He died 13 days after Nana died. That's their love. They had been married for 68 years. But in all seriousness, island folk, Nana told granddaddy, this is the story, Spirit woke her up and said, go get Jimmy so that he can feel and he can know what's going on. He was like a bush doctor, you know, like I said, we island folk. And he's the one who felt it, called his daughter and said, there's something going on and I think she needs to come. We grew up in Key West, so I think she needs to come to Miami, to the big city, and get checked out. So that's a man who understood how to touch a breast. I don't know how he knew that. But also someone who knew this is beyond my scope. This is not something that needs to be further investigated. And that he was her advocate. Now, you know, of course, like I said, she possibly knew something was going on, and she put it in terms of Spirit told me, which could have very well been a confirmation, but she had to know herself as well. But that all to say, and I wanted to also say, when we're talking about, you know, vagina and our seasoned women, not only are the cancers, average age, you know, is 63, but I have to say that, you know, STIs, HIV is now a huge consideration with seasoned folk. We've told them to get healthy. Their hearts are working better. They're engaging in activities that we would be like, what, our grandparents? Please, yes, they are. 1 out of 6 new cases of HIV is for people over 50. But we've not talked about that at all. We have people who, I mean, syphilis is a huge thing in the Black community, particularly now, Black Southern community, but it's also impacting our seasoned folk. Think about it. Senior citizen facilities, assistant living, senior housing, in some cases are like freshman dorms. Thanks to Viagra. Women always could, the men needed to catch up. And then, you know, having lubricants and all of those other kinds of things. We have to talk about this in the church because we're saying it's so sacred, it's so private, we're not talking about it. People are doing things, or it's Sandman coming around and the women just have no idea it's going on. Some things are happening and they're not practicing safe sex. Our women are saying, why do I need to do that? I'm not gonna have a baby anymore. I just told you the statistics. So it's a holistic caring. When you're caring for yourself, you're caring for mind, body, spirit, but you're also caring for all of your organs in all of its different functions.
It's important to keep that in mind, and it's important that we have these conversations and make sure it's not taboo. So you can check with Nana. Nana, what you been doing? Okay.
And why did Granddaddy find your lump?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing their love story with us and your love of Nana and how it has really grown to make sure we can take care of the seasoned women in our lives because they have done so much for us. I want to go ahead and get to some of our questions that our audience here and our family online that they're asking.
Thank you for this open and honest conversation about women's gynecological health. We do have several questions. The first one says, what criteria indicates a need for hysterectomy?
First of all, that would be with one's gynecologist, one's physician. I'll say that. People can get them for a variety of reasons. We're now hearing a lot about women who are having chronic fibroids, and there are schools of thought in both directions. Some say because we are brown women, you know, you're really quick then to make us have a hysterectomy. That's a school of thought. Other women said, I can't take this chronic pain, whether or not it's from fibroids or endometriosis, which we're now talking about, and they opt for a surgical option. Then there are others who, in the Black community, we don't talk a lot about genetic testing, but who know that, okay, maybe in my instance, my grandmother, and then I just had an aunt who just passed of ovarian cancer on Sunday. You know, maybe there's a family gene that's going on, and I want to be preventive. Maybe then some people are opting for that too. But when we're saying a hysterectomy, we have to be, again, very specific of what we're talking about. A hysterectomy may be the uterus only or the uterus and the cervix. An oophorectomy is the ovaries only or the ovaries and the fallopian tubes. So when people say hysterectomy, sometimes they're including everything and just say, I got all cleaned out. But did you? Or did, you know, was something left in? And certainly there are people who are opting to have oophorectomies because while I told you uterine cancer does have a sign, which is postmenopausal bleeding, there's really no specific screening for ovarian cancer. And so, for example, my aunt who passed, she just thought she had fluid in both of her legs. And that was her signal that they actually found the ovarian cancer. And it can mimic a whole lot of other diseases, just so you know.
On the topic of a hysterectomy, if a woman has a hysterectomy, even a partial one, should they still have a pap smear?
Well, it all depends. If they still have a cervix, yes, they should still have a pap smear. But again, we don't want to confuse pap smear and pelvic exam. So let's just say they don't have a cervix, they should still go and get a pelvic exam, but they would not have a need to get a pap smear if they don't have a cervix. But I will always advocate for, yes, a woman should continue getting exams annually.
Other than screenings, what are there other ways to prevent gynecological cancers? And can it be dietary?
Absolutely. Obesity is one of the main factors for a lot of different cancers, be it breast and, of course, your gynecologic cancers. HPV, what we test for cervical cancer, has also been known for vaginal and vulva cancer as well. So not only being screened, but honestly, getting the HPV vaccine is probably our best method for curing cervical cancer, if you will. We can start getting that right now, I think at the age of 12 up until 45, right? The other thing is to practice safe sex. We won't say avoid. Sometimes people say avoid. There's no judgment zone. Practice safe sex. It's also making sure that you are really following with your gynecologist in terms of hormone replacement, birth control. But certainly with some cancers, such as ovarian cancer, being childless, not in breast cancer, for example, not breastfeeding. There are a variety of things that increase your risk, but that those are things that you can do to control it. So diet, exercise, of course, that is a part of it.
And our final question is, do vaginal washes contribute or increase chances of getting cervical cancers?
Okay, vaginal washes, I will tell you this, one of my board members will always say, God was the best creator, and your body it has its own flavor, its own smell that's natural, and it does its own job. Some may say, especially if you're going to a holistic practitioner, that it's okay to have, the vaginal washes, but there's a reason why we don't even talk about doing douches anymore, right? So while I cannot say that there's a correlation, certainly not a causation, but there's not a correlation with cervical cancer, what I would still say is talk to your practitioner, your physician, about doing that, but understand natural can be the best thing, and it's just something that is really not needed.
Thank you to everyone who asked those questions here with us and online. We are opening up this conversation, so if you felt very brave when you asked your questions about nanas and vaginas, then kudos to you for stepping outside the box. But we really appreciate you sharing Project Nana with us, and I think we have all met Nana through you, and we are so grateful that you are allowing her legacy to live on in this way. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Please give Vanessa Hill a big round of applause, everyone. We've had such important conversations here today that really allow us to embrace each other, to know that we're not in these things alone. And our next subject is one that we really have got to lean on each other and talk about more, and that's domestic violence. And so I want to introduce our next two panelists who are going to have a conversation with me about this, because I really think we have the power in this room for all of our friends and family who are watching online to save lives in this arena as well. So first we'll welcome Sydney Ewell. Sydney is the Victim Services Programs Manager at the Center for Sexual Assault Survivors here in Newport News. She's been with the center for 3 years and involved in the sexual and domestic violence field for 9 years. She has experience as a mental health and crisis counselor in therapeutic agencies and as an advocate in both the court setting and nonprofit agencies. Sydney continues to seek opportunities to assist with advocacy, therapeutic, and crisis work advancement. We'll also have joining us is Daryl Brown. Daryl Brown is a community advocate and domestic violence survivor. She has worked for over 30 years for Transitions Family Violence to help and support survivors of domestic violence. She is passionate about trying to ensure that survivors are supported and receive all resources they need to live violence-free lives. She's also an advocate for diversity, inclusion, equity, and racial justice. Let's learn more about them.
When it comes to sexual violence, it's important to know the facts. But there are just a few other things you should know. Sexual violence includes rape and any other unwanted sexual contact or experience. About 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men have experienced sexual violence in the form of physical contact at some point in their lives. Violence starts early. Before the age of 18, 8.5 million women first experienced rape. Victims of sexual violence can experience depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. Sexual violence impacts everyone. Its effects ripple through families, neighborhoods, and workplaces. But we all play a role in its prevention. Public health, businesses, schools, communities, and you can work together to stop sexual violence from happening in the first place. It's about addressing and understanding the root cause of why people single others out for cruel or unjust treatment. It's about promoting attitudes and behaviors for equality and respect. It's about implementing bystander intervention training, meaning teaching people when to stand up and speak out, creating safe spaces, and encouraging healthy relationships for everyone.
welcome Sydney and Daryl. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about this morning. You know, this is so important, and I know we say domestic violence, and we say that and we think it is such an isolated issue that exists outside of our community, as if to say that's that family having that experience and that issue, but this is a community problem that we all can take ownership in helping the people we love with resources, with ways to communicate, with ways to survive. And so again, domestic violence doesn't just mean that's their house and I don't have to worry about it. We should all be here to take care of each other and offer what support we can. So I thank you both for joining us today. Daryl, I want to start with you. I see you in your purple as an advocate today. Why is it so important for you as a survivor to talk about this? And I'm sure a big part of that is wanting to make sure there are more people who survive. Tell us about your journey.
Okay. As you said, as a survivor, I know some of what it's like to be in a domestic violence situation. So living with it and not being able to tell anybody about it because of the shame and the guilt that maybe if I did something better or maybe if I did something different, then things would change. And I think we talked earlier about some of the conditioning we have as young girls, that if you're on the playground and a boy pinches you or punches you or pushes you down and you go and tell someone, then the first thing they say to us is that he's only doing that because he likes you. If you are smacked or hit by your boyfriend or significant other because you were talking to somebody, it's like they're only jealous because they love you. So we are hearing these mixed messages. And so for me, being able to help other survivors that are going through or who have gone through a domestic violence issue is very important to me, because I know that we have the ability to save lives. I know that domestic violence is a health issue. I know that domestic violence is a community issue. So being able to do that is very important to me. Because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and on Monday we do what we call a Day of Unity, where we unfortunately have to light candles for those who have been murdered as a result of domestic violence. And so every time we have to do that, you think to yourself, what could this person have accomplished had their life not been taken, you know, because someone was jealous or because someone felt like they had the power and the control over that person. So, yeah, and I know you said it is a community issue. And I know they say it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to make sure that the village is okay. So it's all about a job, so.
It's all of us. And as much as you're comfortable with sharing about your own experience, can you share that with us, again, as much as you're comfortable with sharing?
Well, I was raised in Washington, D.C., and I was, I guess at that time we say our boyfriend going with somebody. And it started like, you know, like you shouldn't be talking to people, and I got smacks and things like that, but I really didn't pay it any mind, because I'll go back to, you're only doing that because you love me. And so then when I turned 18, he was like, well, we should go to New York. I did not realize that was the isolation process. And so we went to New York and we lived there. And there were some emotional and psychological things that were going on, but there was no real physical until we got married. And so the statement was made to me, I now own you. Didn't really pay it any mind at that time until I did start getting beat. I have gone to the hospital multiple times, but even at the hospital, nobody said, these don't look like you fell down. That tooth that's missing doesn't look like you just like walked into something. And so, but I understand, because at that time, medical and hospitals did not have the knowledge about domestic violence. They didn't know what to look for. They didn't know what to ask. And I didn't know that it was against the law. See, I thought that this was something that happened because growing up, you also saw it in your neighborhood. You know, you saw it in your family. You saw people fighting and nobody ever said anything. And it's not just fighting, but you saw men beating up their wives. Nobody said anything. Nobody said that this is unacceptable. You just thought that this is what happens in family, and nobody says anything because it's really not your business. So, and then I eventually, I had a son, and one night I was being strangled, not choked, because there is a difference. I was being strangled. And at that time, as I'm blacking out, I'm praying, God, please, if you get me out of this one time, we won't have to do it again. And so after that, I called my mom. And realistically, my mom was ready to come to New York with her gun and just shoot him and get it over with, but I also didn't want her to go to jail. She was like, no. So, and even before then, once I tried to commit suicide, because I thought that, because I didn't see a way out. I didn't really, I didn't see a way out. I took my son to one of my friend's house because I sure didn't want him to be there and, like that. And so I didn't, because God was like, no, that's not what we're going to do today. So when I didn't die, then I started plotting on how can I kill him and get away with it, because I did have a gun, so I was going to shoot him, and I thought about how I could drag his body out the window. I just thought all of these crazy things, and then I was like, no. And that's when I called my mom and said, could you please come and get me, and explain to her what was going on, because prior to that, I had never explained to anybody what was going on. I had people that saw me with like bruises and busted lips and things like that, but nobody ever said anything, So, and I had a friend that had moved here, and so that's when I came to Newport News. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. I know that you share it often in the advocacy work that you do, but I know that it can still be difficult to share. And so thank you for being brave enough to share that with us. And I know there are people listening or watching who can echo what you have felt, what you've experienced. The same plans in their mind have probably also run through those plans as well. So we love you, we support you, and just because you're an advocate doesn't mean that it's not still difficult to share. And so we thank you for your bravery and sharing with us. Please give her a round of applause, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. And so, Sydney, a part of the work you do is making sure people know they're not alone, and are not blaming themselves. And that is, I think, a huge part as you say, okay, I keep doing something wrong. If I just get better, it will get better. Tell us about some of the signs or some of the things we should be paying attention to, either in relationships or we should be looking for in our family and friends.
Yes, and especially and we work together a lot, there's a very deep intersection with intimate partner violence, sexual assault, domestic violence, and a lot of times that key word is that self-blame and the self-doubt, and I think also just the piece of, someone is not going to believe me, or I don't feel heard, or even, I don't believe that this is happening myself. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the signs could be, like you mentioned, that isolation, even it goes along with mental health, of being able to say, like, we might look at relationships as, oh, I have a partner, I have someone that protects me, but there's a thin line between someone protecting you and controlling you. And so being able to recognize those signs and I think we've talked a lot today about education and knowing what that really looks like. So is someone, taking you on a trip or taking you away from your family, is that because they want to be around you more, or is it because they're trying to isolate you so that other people, you don't have that support system, you don't feel like people will believe you, or you don't feel as if, or even the people that a lot of times that are the perpetrators, they're not the, Chester the molester that you would see on TV or the stranger in the alley. It is someone that we trust and that we know, and they may have groomed us to have these behaviors or to trust them as well too. So a lot of the signs, they may not be as blatant because they're people that we trust and we believe that would never harm us are intentionally harming us. And I think a lot of it comes with education of what a survivor looks like, and also education on the perpetrator's part as well too, because a lot of people don't recognize that they are abusing and controlling, or like we said, there's those signs, the cycles. We've seen our parents go through this, we've seen our grandparents go through this, and also that what goes on in this house stays in this house, and that's not okay. We have to have a community to say, my house, yes, it is a sacred place, but there's harmful things happening in this house that I deserve to be free of. Just like you mentioned earlier, we deserve to have a life that is full of love and joy and abundance, and we can't do that if we're being stifled.
How do you know the difference between someone being protective, and as you said, and someone being controlling? Are there, and I know you said the signs can be difficult to see. In hindsight, the move to New York was to isolate you from your family so they wouldn't know what was going on. At what point did you realize, oh, this isn't about us being adventurous and moving to New York? This is about something else. At what point did you realize he's trying to isolate me?
When it was like, no, I couldn't really call my mom. I couldn't really go to DC for like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go and visit my mom. So it was like, no, because if you get there, then, because your mom really doesn't like me, which she didn't, so that was not a lie. But you know how you think that you know more than your mom. So those type of things, it made me be like, oh, okay, no, this is not okay. But as I said, the shame and the guilt is kind of like what ends up keeping you in the relationship, because you'll be thinking, well, if I would have listened, then I wouldn't be in this situation. And if I leave, then what's going to happen? When you have a child, what's going to happen with my child? If you grew up without a father, then I don't want my child to grow up without a father. So those type of things. And when you talk about, like, what are the signs, I mean, some of the signs aren't as clear, but then you have some signs that are clear. But a lot of times, and I'm going to say we as women, because we are caregivers, because we are fixers, because all of those things, we sometimes think that the behavior that I'm seeing now, which is not the behavior I saw at the beginning, but that's okay because I can help him. I can pray him through it. I can make him better because I see what his potential is. But if that person doesn't see the potential, it's really no good that we see it, because you can't change a person. We're not called to be the Holy Spirit, so we can't change people, But like Sydney said, not wanting you to talk to other people. You shouldn't be going out with the people that you used to be friends with before we even got together. Checking your cell phone or blowing your cell phone up when you're not home. Checking your mileage. Why is this 3 miles over when it only takes you X amount of miles to get to work? Making you be able to account for every dime that you spend. We both work, but I'm in charge of the money. So it's all about domestic violence as well as sexual assault, human trafficking. They're all about power and control. So it's not who's the strongest, but it's about I have the power and the control over you, and I'm going to use it. And sometimes it's not physical, but you think of the emotional, the psychological abuse, even spiritual abuse, you know. So there are the signs, but sometimes we just, those red flags be flying, but we just be pushing them down. I can help, you know, so. Yeah.
I think it's very powerful what you said. We can't change people. We can't. We can pray for people.
Yes.
We can love people in a way that's safe for us to love them, and a lot of times that can mean from afar.
Yes.
And hope that they get the help they need. But we cannot change people or love people enough that they will make different decisions. We don't have any autonomy over anyone else. So Sydney, when we start to see those types of things, what is someone supposed to do? You know, there's this fear in approaching your partner who you've realized at this point, whether it be through physical or psychological, emotionally, spiritually, is abusive. How is someone supposed to, when they realize, oh, I'm in this situation, what's the next step to take?
And I think that's a really good question, especially because the person that you're trusting the most may be doing a lot of the most damage. So a lot of times people don't know who to turn to. And even just like what Ms. Darrell mentioned, you know, that fear of even calling your mother, or that fear of that shame and embarrassment of, I should be able to handle this. I should be able to get through this by myself. But really, even having that one other trusted person, or, I mean, I like to kind of bring it back to, you know, when we're kids, they tell us, you know, there's a trusted adult that you can go and talk to, but who do the adults have? Who do the adults have to go to? You know, we have this building, we have a church, and there are people here, which is why I'm so grateful that we're doing it in this setting as well, too, because everyone knows someone who has experienced domestic violence or sexual assault. And sometimes someone may be coming to us and we may not know how to respond to that, but that doesn't mean that we can't sit there and believe them as well too. So I think that goes another aspect of education, of knowing what the resources are. Because if you don't have, even if there is that one trusted person that you can call and tell, whether that's your pastor, whether that's your best friend from, you know, back in the day, or even just someone, you know, you Google a phone number. I think Google has been our best friend for a while, but knowing that, like, our services, both of our agencies, are completely free of charge. So even if you make that phone call, we have 24/7 crisis hotlines, that it doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, when a lot of times those memories or those bad dreams or anything hit you, I can call, and we've had so many people, I know you can attest to this too, I don't even know what to say, but I'm in a bad place, and we can walk you through that. And so even just being able to trust in that one person, or maybe not even put your full trust, but say, something bad is happening to me, I don't know who to talk to, or I'm scared, and even typing that into Google and making that phone call, that can make a world of a difference, and we can help you along the way. That's what advocates are for, and the community and village is for.
Yeah. And we're continuing this conversation, but I want to make sure we get the contact information out now, and we will remind people again at the conclusion of the conversation. How would people just share your organization and how people would reach you? And Sydney, you can go first.
So yes, I work for the Center for Sexual Assault Survivors, and we service the entire peninsula area. All of our services are completely free of charge. So we do have a 24/7 crisis hotline. I'm not sure if you want me to give that number right now.
Yes.
Okay, it's 757-236-5620. And then we also have an office number that's open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. But again, the 24/7 crisis hotline, we have visitthecenter.org, and that has all of our services, all of our hotline information. And that runs the gamut of not just the individual counseling support group, not just direct survivors, but we provide that education and also the advocacy and talking about healthy relationships, consent, boundaries, those types of things that are available.
Can you repeat the number one more time?
757-236-5620.
All right, and Daryl, can you talk to us about transitions?
Okay, and Transitions Family Violence Service, of course, is a domestic violence and human trafficking provider. And we also have a 24-hour hotline, and that is 757-723-7774. And all of our services, as Sydney said, are free of charge. So we do have the counseling, the support group, services for men, women, and the LGBTQ community. So no judgment. Yeah.
Yes.
And can you repeat that number again?
757-723-7774.
I'd like to also talk about the difficulty in recognizing or accepting that someone's threats are real. And I say this just sharing with my family, and the story has been shared back home in New Orleans. So my younger cousin, several years younger, but she was a mother. She was engaged. Her and her fiance had 4 children. And her and I weren't particularly close. There's an age gap. I'm in Virginia. But the most beautiful, and her name was Erica Tate. And in January of this year, her fiance killed her. Shot and killed her in their home. And when I first learned about it, I said, I didn't even know that anything was going on, and I wouldn't know because we did not grow up together. I hadn't heard anything communicated from my family back home. I've been away for so long. And it was just really difficult to understand that someone with these 4 babies, and all young, and the youngest was 9 months old, and she was very, very confident, very, very determined, very much, this is how it is, and so seemingly in control of our interactions as adults. I saw her a few years ago when our aunt passed away, and I just remember thinking, it's like, man, she just had the 2 of her boys are twins, and just so like on top of it and control this, I can call the shots, and so it was difficult, for me to know that she was gone, but that she may have been going through so much that certainly I didn't know, and I wouldn't have known, but did the rest of the family even know, and how would you even approach it if someone is so protective of the family they're building? So how do you open up a conversation among family, even if you don't know if anything's going on, that would allow them to feel open enough to reach out for help? Or I just keep thinking, how would any of us have known to be able to prevent something like that? And I think that's the question that, especially my family back home thinks about. I think about, like, how do you even prevent it? And I don't know if there is an answer, but what do you do? Is there signs that we missed, or how do you know? How do you help?
I think sometimes when we look back, we say, yeah, something wasn't right. And so we have intuition, or people call it various things, God gives you gifts, and we know that something is not right. But we also have this thing about that's their business. But to be able to say to somebody, I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm really concerned about you. And most people that end up in domestic violence relationships, that's not how it happens at the beginning. Because at the beginning, whoever the abuser is, male or female, it's like they are the most wonderful person that you've ever met. And they treat you with great kindness and great respect. And so what everybody in the family sees is the representative. What you have at the beginning is the representative until the real person shows their self. And that's not done just like boom, boom. It's like gradual. So one day it might be one thing, And then everything is fine, what we call the honeymoon phase, the cycle of domestic violence. Because I've done this to you either physically or emotionally. But then after that, I'm telling you about how sorry I am, and I will never ever do it again. And I'm crying and the whole 9 yards. And so you do think that everything is going to be okay. And just to be real plain, when there are domestic violence episodes for everybody, it's not like every night something is happening. There might be an episode and then there's not another episode for 6 months. You know, so it's systematic. It's like, oh, okay. So I mean, a lot of times families do like blame themselves or they second guess themselves. What could I have done different? What could I have done different? And in some cases, there's really nothing that you could have done that would have been different. You know, I think that the best thing that we can do with people is to let them know that we are non-judgmental. I'm gonna listen to you, I'm gonna believe you. I'm gonna believe you even if whoever it is that you're married to or you're engaged to is the police chief, the captain of the army, you know, like the elder at the church. I'm still going to believe you. But a lot of times we don't because of the person, you know, him or her. It's impossible. They would never do anything like that. I know them, I work with them. But yeah, it's not the person that is in private.
It's almost as if the abusers, they know how to play the roles.
Yeah.
And so it makes it, and that's almost like, can it be like the facade they keep up to ensure that no one else knows or would even suspect that something is going on?
All right.
And that's why it's so important that we believe our friends and family members when they come to us, because no one's going to make that up. You think about the amount of courage it takes to say something. Why would someone make something like that up? So if someone's coming to you to say, this is happening, I'm afraid, or I don't know what to do, believe them. And I think sometimes that can be such the biggest endorsement, validation,
Yes.
show of love. Just believe. Can you imagine the amount of courage someone will have? Finally, I've talked to someone who believes me. And it gives you almost like an empowerment, like, okay, step one, someone believes me. Step two, what do I do? And we talk about the step two. If there is someone who is watching this now, who knows they need help, walk us through what happens when they call those crisis lines. What happens when someone picks up the phone, and then what happens in the moments or days after that?
For us, for the domestic violence hotline, once they call the hotline, they will be talking to an advocate, a trained advocate, a trauma-informed advocate that will listen to their story. Yes, there are some information that they need to get, but for the most part, they're listening to what it is that you have to say, and also trying to find out what it is that you want to do, because we're client-centered. So if a survivor chooses not to get a protective order, not to report it to the police, that's their right. So we want to know, what is it that you want to do? Do they need emergency housing? Do they need to be, for us to help them to get to like another state, you know, because they're really not feeling safe here? What is it that they need to do? So if we're bringing them into the emergency housing, then the advocate helps them to arrange that, or they might work with them to develop a safety plan if they choose, because maybe they choose not to leave. Maybe they just want to talk. And so if you want to talk, then they'll do that, but also help you to do a safety plan. If the person decides that, yeah, I want to file a protective order, then we have court advocates that work with them through that. You know, if they're like, well, no, I just want counseling, I just want therapy, then they'll do the referral for that. So it's all about what the survivor wants to see happen.
And To kind of piggyback off of that, especially with the safety plan piece, it's that physical safety and emotional safety as well too. Because like Ms. Darrell mentioned, a lot of times people either they don't, and you may talk about this too, the most dangerous time for a person is when they're leaving a domestic violence situation. So putting those plans into place beforehand and knowing what those steps are. And so, but your emotional mindset has to be in a better place, and you have to know what that looks like. And I think, we've talked about the power and control aspect, so putting that control back into the survivor's hands and into figuring out what do I have control over, and, is counseling the best option for me? Is a protective order the best option for me? Does that make the situation more dangerous? Because sometimes that does happen. So we do sit, and I love that you keep emphasizing that it's what the survivor wants, because a lot of times, someone will call our hotline and we'll look at it and we'll say like, well, this is what the, imminent crisis is, but that's not what they're presenting with. So we have to, really listen and support from where they want to go with it versus, we might think in our mind that, okay, these physical bruises or these physical scars are more dangerous, but the emotional mindset and even just going through, are my kids safe?
Yes.
Do I have a way to get back and forth to work? Am I going to get fired if I go to court to get a protective order? So those types of things that a lot of people don't, think about the entire picture. Sometimes, we think about, okay, that person has been abusing you, you need to get out now. But there are steps that have to be put into place first, and that's on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
When we're friends and family, or, sometimes people feel more comfortable reaching out to a stranger because they may feel or have internalized being embarrassed about reaching out. What's the best thing that we can do to be ready to help? If someone comes to us and says, I'm in a domestic violence situation, I need help. I'm assuming we need to have both of your numbers there ready to give to them to reach out. But what are practical things that we can do if someone reaches out to us to say, I need some help?
And so go back to what we said earlier. What does that person want to see happen? Because when you say help, what does help look like? So does help look like helping you to get away, like my mom came and picked me up? Does help look like maybe me paying for a hotel for a couple of nights while you think about what it is that you want to do? So it just depends, but you can definitely start out with, here's a 24-hour hotline that you can call and allow them to help you assess what it is that you want to do. And I think when you go back to family and friends, if a person comes to you, number one, we'll go back to believing, but sometimes as family, we want people to do an action like immediately, if not sooner. And so if I come to you one time, are you going to be empathetic? If I come to you 2 times, are you still going to have that same empathy? If I come to you 3 times, because I still haven't left yet, but I'm telling you about this situation, what is going to be your response to me? When I do it 4 times, am I going to get on your last nerve? And so when it gets to the 5th time, or look, I don't want to hear it anymore. But can you work with me until I get up the nerve? Because it might take me those 5 times in talking to you to be able to finally say, okay. You know how people say, I'm gonna lose weight, I'm gonna lose weight, I'm gonna lose weight, I'm gonna lose weight. And then they finally, because after they didn't talk themselves into it or they didn't program it in their computer, then they can do it. So it's the same thing with thinking about leaving. But we as family members and friends can't be like, I'm tired of hearing that same old song. Listen to the song, be okay with the song. Because God has placed you in their life for a reason,
That's yes. Wow, you're right, because when someone comes to us with an issue, we either want to fix it right away or want them to fix it right away based off whatever advice we give. And that's not our role. Our role is to listen, advise when they ask for advice, and be patient.
Yes.
And I'm glad you made that analogy too, because there's so many things that a lot of us know we need to do to better our health or our lives, really, that we say, I'm going to do this, but it takes time, or sometimes it's that one encounter or experience that you say, no matter what happens, I have to make a change now. Thank you all so much. This is, I know this has been an eye-opening conversation for me. I know so many people here as well. I know we have some of our family members who are asking questions. So let's get to those questions now.
Thank you. We do have some questions around the agencies that are represented this morning. Do your agencies accept donations? And then the second part is, can you also recommend other resources in our local community?
Okay, we do accept donations. We have a strict donation policy since COVID, so we don't accept clothing, but I can definitely give the office number, which is 757-722-2261, and Jasmine Nelson, who is our donation and community engagement manager. She can let you know exactly what donations we are in need of. And when you said other resources, help me.
Yes, can you recommend additional resources in the local community to support victims of domestic violence?
Okay, well, of course, the Center for Sexual Assault. And then I think like the Newport News has a domestic violence team. Riverside Hospital has the Hand in Hand program, which also they work with survivors of domestic violence. I mean, I guess basically all of our community partners, because we collaborate basically with everybody, because we know that we can't do all of the services ourselves. But if they call the 24-hour hotline and they're looking for a specific resource, then that can be given to them, because we do have a resource book at that hotline.
And I think with the 7 cities as well, every region across Hampton Roads may have different services, and so I think you can also call the non-emergency police number where you live, and they will be able to direct you to the crisis line in your specific area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that may be what they're asking as well.
Well, even if you call either one of our hotlines and you say, I'm in Norfolk, we can give you the phone number for the YWCA. If you're in Virginia Beach, we can give you the number to Samaritan House. If you're in California, we can give you the number to whatever shelter is in that area, because we also have the resources of all the shelters across the United States. And unfortunately, they also have shelters in other countries, or domestic violence program and sexual assault programs in other countries.
And to just to add to that too, even with Riverside, they have a sexual assault nursing, like forensic program. So if someone has been sexually assaulted and needs to get the physical examination done, and our hotline is automatically called for that as well too. So you automatically get free services through the hospital and free services as far as advocacy goes with that piece as well.
Thank you. We had several questions, and I know you've already touched on this a little bit, but several questions still remain about helping victims, whether they be in your family, your next door neighbor, in the community, who are experiencing sexual assault or mental abuse. What are the first steps?
Support, listen, and believing, and again, meeting them where they are. So, you know, I like to think of it, we're all kind of mini crisis counselors, even when we don't realize it. And even our agency, our motto is because sexual assault affects us all, and domestic violence affects us all. So we all know someone that's been impacted. So all we can, the best thing that we can do is, like you mentioned earlier, that validation, really listening. What are you saying to me? Even if it is that checking on your strong friend. You know, a lot of people, and thank you again for sharing your story, because a lot of times those are the people that are the most confident, that we see that are the most bubbly, and they're living a life behind closed doors that's so painful and so really embarrassing to share. So you probably won't get, you know, just by that first question of how are you doing or face value, but really just checking in and saying, how are you really doing? How is your mental health? Is there anything I can help you with? And then when they do really open up to you, sitting with them and saying, like, what do you want to see coming out of this? Do you feel safe? Where would you like me to sit with you and make these phone calls? Do you want me to come, even as we mentioned earlier, do you want me to come with you to a doctor's appointment? Can I come with you to the examination? Do you want me to help you with making that first phone call to the counselor? I can help you find those resources. So really just listening and supporting.
And our final question, can you talk a little bit about human trafficking?
Okay. Well, one of the things that we saw in human trafficking is that there is a correlation or intersection between human trafficking and domestic violence. And from working with, because our agency works with Homeland Security and the Office of the Attorney General. And so we saw like an uptick of survivors being trafficked by family members. So human trafficking is the force, coercion, and fraud of somebody. So it can be either sex trafficking or it could be labor trafficking. So for instance, if I tell somebody that, oh, I have a job for you to do at my house and I'm gonna pay you X amount of money, and then when they get to my house, I don't allow them to leave and I don't pay them, but they have to continuously clean my house or I maybe farm them out to somebody else for them to clean that person's house, but I get the money. So that's the force and the coercion. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like across any state lines. And it's not just foreigners that are trafficked, and it doesn't look like Taken, because everybody saw the movie Taken, and so we automatically think, oh, that's how it is, because some trafficking starts out as a relationship, and then it turns into trafficking. So basically, trafficking is you forcing somebody or coercing somebody or committing fraud to have somebody to do some type of either a commercial sex act or labor, and I'm getting the money, I'm benefiting from it. But understanding that anyone that is under 18, they cannot consent. And so from my understanding, the attorney does not have to prove that there was coercion, fraud, or force. Okay, and sex trafficking is totally different from a sex worker. So sometimes when people hear that, oh, that person was sex trafficked, people automatically, not everybody, but some people assume that we're talking about prostitution. Okay, and so there is a difference. And it is in our area, because we are port cities and we have I-95 and I-64 up and down the East Coast, and we have seen an uptick in human trafficking.
Thank you all so much. I know we focused a lot on domestic violence, and before I let you go, I want to talk about sexual assault as well, because there's a lot of blame that goes on with sexual assault as well. That we feel, well, did I do something that allowed someone to think that they could do this to me, or maybe I shouldn't have worn this, or there's so much, and I think in everything we talked about today, from mental health to domestic violence, sexual assault, there's so much blame we place on ourselves, and doesn't need to be, because it's not our fault. Can you talk about the range of sexual assault? Because immediately what comes to mind for a lot of us is the violent act of rape. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But there is a spectrum of sexual assault that people don't realize until years later. Oh my God, I was sexually assaulted, but because it wasn't rape, I said I let it go. So just briefly talk about the range of sexual assault and why it can be difficult to report those things sometimes.
Yes, and I think you hit the nail on the head that a lot of times people don't realize that they're not consenting to an act, or that it's not just rape. And rape obviously is a form of sexual assault, but there is molestation. You can be orally raped. There is sexual harassment. Sexual violence is an umbrella. Even going back to, if let's say your boss won't let you continue working there unless you agree to sexual advances or behaviors, that is sexual assault. And a lot of times there's another consequence that goes with that if you don't comply with the sexual advances or the sexual violence, then it does more damage to yourself. So there is a lot of self-blame, particularly because even with sexual violence, you can't see the scars. They're not those physical scars. There's a lot of that emotional and the piece of, again, and I think media perpetuates that a lot. Even the cases that are coming back up, I love that you brought that up, that a lot of people didn't know, because, we talk about like the Bill Cosbys, the R. Kellys, those situations that maybe a person may have willingly went to the room and knew what could have happened, but that doesn't mean that when no means no, and no could be nonverbal. That could be the inability to consent because you're incapacitated, or because you're intoxicated, or because mentally you're not at a developmental level to be able to consent or to know what's going on either. So it is a vast range. It could go from touching someone, and that can start with those grooming behaviors as a child. And a lot of times this is when we see, we talk a lot about how the meaning of a sexual assault experience may mean more than the actual physical act itself. And a lot of times we give the example of, let's say a child was sexually assaulted every time they didn't do what their parents said. And they grow up to be a people-pleasing person because that's what they associate with, okay, if I don't do what this person tells me to do, then I'm going to be violated to some extent. And they also grow up believing that they can't trust their own gut or trust their own instincts because you're told that your instincts are wrong or someone else has control over those things. So just recognizing, honestly, go with your gut. If something makes you feel uncomfortable, even if you don't realize why, that's what we talk about, those trusted people. And then even just figuring out, okay, maybe that good touch, bad touch. I think it goes back to the education piece. We talk a lot about even what you brought up earlier, someone, they hit you because they like you, or, they're picking on you, or they're jealous because they like you, but this doesn't feel right. And I may not be able to explain why, but this is a bad touch. And a child may not know what that really looks like. So really talking about healthy relationships, consent, boundaries. Did I tell you that you could do that? Even boiling down to, is it okay for me to give you a hug? Because some people, and a lot of times that's another sign that we can see. Is this child uncomfortable being touched? Is this child uncomfortable being close to someone else? And sometimes we just look at that, they're just a weird kid, or they just want to be left alone. But a lot of times it could be something more than that, too.
Or not forcing kids to hug family members when they're clearly not comfortable with that.
Yes.
And I think we kind of grow up doing that. Give auntie or uncle so-and-so a hug, and the child kind of cowers back, and it's like, well, if they don't, just let them be. If they don't want to. And I think that teaches early on, like, this is my body. If I'm not comfortable with something, I don't have to do it, and my family supports me, not forcing me to do something that I'm uncomfortable with.
I just want to say one thing, because I think, and I can't remember her name, Nana's Law, but just because when you guys were talking about naming your body parts, that's another thing that we need to make sure that we are saying to our kids, because if you identify it, if you name it, then that means it belongs to you. But when we have like 67 different names for a vagina and about 68 probably for a penis, call it what it is. We call this a hand. We don't have any other names for a hand, an eye, a mouth. But when it comes to our reproductive areas, then we call them like all kinds of things. And go back to not teaching stranger danger, because generally those who are molesting, those who are causing harm are not strangers. They are family members or friends.
Absolutely. I think it's, to that point, also important to teach our kids, like you said, the difference between good touch, bad touch. And prayerfully, they go throughout their childhood and adolescence and into adulthood with never being molested. I think it also builds, again, that ownership of,
My body.
this is my body.
Right.
And this is ownership of that. Before I let you all go, if someone does experience sexual assault, sometimes you don't realize you've been assaulted until years later. And even in the moment, there is fear in reporting it. And then guilt over, I'm afraid to report, and then if I don't report, are they going to do this to someone else? And am I supposed to walk around with that emotional burden of trying to decide, and is it my fault because I didn't report the person who assaulted me? If they go out and assault someone else, that's also not fair to yourself too. What do you do if it's recent and you're trying to decide to report? And then also, if many years have passed and you don't know what the statute of limitations is where you are, and maybe it's beyond what you can report, but maybe you're like, I think I need some help still processing that.
So one thing I definitely, and thank you again for bringing that up about the blame part and the guilt, because one thing that we talk a lot about it is the lack of self-control of the perpetrator with that. So I give the example a lot with survivors that, let's say you do go through the court process, this person is convicted, they go to prison for, which this may not be unrealistic, but 20 years, then they get out and assault someone else. You as a survivor did everything that you were supposed to do, and they still had the lack of self-control to not assault someone else or not engage in that behavior. So to go back to your question about whether it's recent or 30 years prior, call us. We can walk you through those steps. So if it is recent, we can let you know about the protective order. We can talk about what is the best option for you if you do want to report. Even also letting you know what the actual process looks like, because it is not SVU. It's not solved in 2 days. We see that online, or we see that in media. And that's not the reality of it a lot of times. There is a perk exam that you can get. You can figure out if you do have STIs, if you're pregnant. You can get those types of things examined and dealt with and addressed in a safe space as well too. So even if it did happen 30 years ago, let's look into what the statute of limitations are. Let's look into what the police will say. Can we make that phone call with you to say, okay, a lot of times we'll have people write down all the questions that they have, because when you're actually having that phone conversation with, or any type of conversation with law enforcement, with the hospital, your mind is running a mile a minute. So you may forget the important questions that you want to ask. And so really going through, what does this actually look like and what are my options? And then helping them make that decision for themselves, because they may realize, okay, I don't want to go through the court process. I may find justice and closure. And sometimes I don't like to use the word closure, because, we may... Exactly. We may heal from something, but it may not define us at all, but that doesn't mean we're going to forget about it. So I just like to let people know what the actual process looks like, and if that's something that they want to go through, because sometimes they want to go through a piece of that. Maybe a protective order is the best part in therapy, and I don't want to get the rest of the criminal charges, or maybe I would like to go through that as well too. So letting people know their options and figuring out whether it was 30 years ago or 30 days ago or 30 seconds ago, someone is there and there are opportunities and options for you.
If you could both repeat the numbers to your organizations, I just want to, again, I'm sensitive to that, so I want to make sure people get that, get those numbers. And so, Daryl, if you could repeat the number for transitions.
757-723-7774.
And Sydney.
So the Center for Sexual Assault Survivors, 757-236-5260.
Ladies, thank you so much. Please give them a huge round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. The women we have had on this stage today are some of the most beautiful, courageous, loving people that I have encountered, because it takes so much to stand up in our communities and say, I'm going to use my story, my journey, to make somebody else's path a little bit easier. And that's the whole purpose, I believe, of why God put us here in the first place, is to love each other and to help each other live beautiful, abundant, joyful lives. I want to thank everybody who has been open today and sharing and giving us nuggets of information. So I hope everyone who's here in the audience today, and to our friends and family who are online who have really joined us in this conversation, I hope you got the information that you needed today to be able to move forward in your lives with that joy and abundance that we are so deserving of. And I'm sure we'll be able to connect people with whatever resources they need if there are additional questions for that. Again, my name is Jessica Larche. Thank you so much for joining us for the Women's Health event. Lady Swann, did you want to come out and say a few words? Please give her a round of applause for putting this together. Oh, we have one more video. I'm sorry. I'm so excited for everybody to get the resources and they need and to celebrate Lady Swann. We have a final video we want to share with you all today.
Transitions Family Violence Service. We are a local domestic violence program. We offer services to survivors of domestic violence as well as human trafficking. We service the areas of Hampton, Newport News, York County, and Poquoson. Some of the services that we offer are, number one, a 24-hour hotline. We also offer emergency housing, transitional housing, trauma-informed counseling, as well as children's services. And all our services are free.
Again, that's a reminder about transition. So we have shared the phone numbers, the information when it comes to so many topics today: domestic violence, sexual assault, health for the seasoned women in our lives, mental health, heart health. And Lady Swann, this has been so important. I'm so grateful that you have opened the church for this type of platform, for an open and honest conversation where we didn't let stigma or taboo get in the way of the conversation today.
Listen, first of all, thank you so much for those of you that are in the audience here today. Thank you for those of you that are viewing online. And thank you, Jessica, for sharing your time with us today. You know, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we addressed in the church forum are the taboo subjects. Now, I know that we have taken a very deep dive into some very deep conversations today. So I want to thank you for your courage and for your bravery for just sitting through it all. I know some of it probably caused us to clutch our pearls a little bit, but nevertheless, these are conversations that we need to have. And one of the things that I want to leave with ladies today, here in person with us, and those of you that are viewing online, listen, I want you to know that because these things I know are going on in our communities, it's going on in our churches, it's going on in our families, I need you to know that you have a community of sisters that are here in Ivy that will welcome you, that will love on you, and that will help you to walk through these journeys of these situations. We take love, grow, and serve so very seriously here. And love looks a lot different to a lot of people, but I'll say that loving in the context of today's summit is loving is to just be aware. Loving is to hear and to trust and believe, like Sister Darrell mentioned. Growing is to just, again, get the facts, get the information, be aware of what's going on with your mental health, with your bodies, with your mind, with your heart. And then serving is just taking action, getting the courage to take the first step. It always just takes the first step. And if we can get the courage to do that, because we build up the trust and we build up the community of sisterhood that will tell me that I'm not going to be judged and that you're going to believe what I say if it's not the first, second, third, or fourth, like Sister Darrell said. If it's the fifth time, treat me the way that you would treat me if it was the first time. And I think that we would go a long way in healing a lot of the hearts and the women that experience these, that are in these situations. It may not be now, it may have happened years ago, but the residual effect of that, we're still seeing it today. So thank you so much. Thank you. This has been amazing, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I've enjoyed having this conversation, and I want to leave everyone with a bit of hope, because again, a lot of what we talked about today has been very heavy. But I want us to remind ourselves that God wants us to have a beautiful, joyful, abundant life. And there is a scripture, I will paraphrase. I'm not going to try to get it verbatim. Pastor Swann come looking at me saying I didn't get all the words right.
Preach it.
But it's a word that has really been a foundation, especially along my own journey, what I see for so many of us, and it's Deuteronomy 30:19. And essentially God there is telling us to decide to live, and that we all have choices to make in this life. And he wants us to choose life so that we may live. And so I just encourage you, whatever that looks like for you, whatever nugget of information you got today, to make one good decision, one day at a time, one moment at a time, to decide to live, because it is your birthright and you deserve it. We love you all. We thank you all so much for joining us today. And for our friends here in the church and online, we say we love you and we pray that you have a great day.
Thank you.
I'm an eternal optimist.
Gymnastics Hall of Famer.
Mom, nurse, overall awesome human.
And survivors of sexual violence.
I didn't talk about it. I was told not to talk about it.
So I'm here to talk about it.
Because I can't stay quiet.
I was told I would never escape the darkness.
But we have.
Because for myself and for you, I wouldn't stay quiet.
You may feel broken.
You aren't.
You may feel alone.
You aren't. Because we
Didn't stay quiet.
I was able to break my silence.
Because of those who refuse to stay quiet.
I am a businesswoman.
TV host, DJ.
Activist.
Actor. Painter. Advocate.
Ally.
Survivor.
Survivor. Survivor.
And we won't stay quiet.